Brilliant. Good morning, everyone. I'm sure everyone knows who I am by now, but I'm Carl Wallace, Head of Festivals. So thank you very much for attending this session this morning. This is a session on regional hubs, and I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Bernadette Quinn from TU Dublin. Bernadette, I hope you don't mind me saying this, has been working with the Arts Council over the last 6 to 9 years now. So we have worked with Bernadette on loads of different projects in the conference, and we're really delighted, especially with Bernadette's specialism as a geographer, to be able to host this hub, and welcome to our panelists as well. So this session will be about 90 minutes, so we'll finish at about 11:30 for a break, and I'll hand over to Bernadette. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can hear me there. Lovely. Good morning, everybody, and you're most welcome. Thank you for coming in bright and early this morning to this absolutely lovely place that is the Model, to join us on this conversation that we're going to have about how the arts festival sector can build capacity by collaboration with other festivals and with other cultural stakeholders, and then how that might particularly happen perhaps in a regional context. So as Carl said, I work in TU Dublin, and I have a long-standing interest in researching festivals, and I'm very delighted to have been asked to be involved in this, so thank you, Carl. So we have a really interesting, varied panel of people with us this morning, and they're going to share some thoughts and ideas about, if and how the festival sector can, in fact, support its own development by establishing and sustaining. We'll have to get on to the sustaining question as well. How we might devise models premised on festivals working together and with others in various ways. So I'm just going to briefly run around and introduce the panelists very briefly, but they will say a little bit more about themselves when they start. So right beside me is Emma Ní Haslan, who's the manager of Burr Theatre and Arts Centre. And beside Emma, we have Roisin Daly, who's a Culture Development Officer with Belfast City Council. Then we have Craig Dubose from just up the street from Sligo Festivals Collective, and also Sligo Chess and Culture Festival. Then we have Emily Ross, who's the co-founder of Resonance, a festival of ideas, and she also sits on the board of South and Southwest. And then we have Liam Horn, and we particularly welcome Liam because he's not in the festival sector, so we really are delighted to have an external view perspective this morning. So he's the Hub Community Development Executive with the Western Development Commission, and he works on the Connected Hubs project. So that's our panel, and our discussions are going to be guided by 2 questions. We're going to give about 45 minutes to each question. I'm going to go around the panel on the first question. Everybody will speak for a few moments, and then I'm going to open it to the floor. I'm going to be watching the time, and then we'll bring it back and we'll run around with the second question. Now, the second question is going to focus really on the regional issue. But firstly, I'm going to invite our panellists to share some thoughts on just, can the arts festival sector support its own development by establishing models that are somehow sustainable, premised on festivals working together with just festivals or with other cultural stakeholders? And I'll turn to Emma first.
Thanks, Bernadette, and thank you, everybody. Good morning. So I'm Emma Ní Haslan. I am the manager of Burr Theatre and Arts Centre, and we have 5 festivals in Burr. The long-running, 58 years old, Burr Vintage Week and Arts Festival, which is a community and arts festival. And since opening the doors in summer 2000 at Burr Theatre and Arts Centre, we have since then established 4 more festivals which are art form focused. We have Hullabaloo Children's Arts Festival, Scripps Playwriting Festival, Offline Film Festival, and the youngest of 10 years, Burr Festival of Music. And I suppose we found in Burr, while we certainly were all operating, or each festival was operating kind of independently, and we would regularly, one would cross over the other, we'd intersperse at times, and certainly saw that we were expressing shared challenges. And in 2019, 2020, Dermot McLaughlin was engaged and to work with us, and that was supported by Offaly Local Development Company, and we examined the festivals in Birr and to make a plan for a shared future. And there was a series of recommendations came out of that study with Dermot, and it included us working together, which was quite organically and easily to do, considering where we were, and then the engagement of shared professional services, which would address, a variation of needs and supports that we needed. And I suppose from the outset, we were very much, could see our festivals, we weren't competitors, we weren't competing with each other. We had our own ecosystem, and we recognised our individuality, but yet that we did have a lot of shared issues. So some of the things that came out of the report and again came out of supports that came our way over the years through various mechanisms, one of them particularly being the Capacity Building Support Scheme with the Arts Council, and then there was supports through Offaly Local Development Company as well, was things like marketing resources, fundraising resources, and help with fundraising for all of us and as a collective. Things like the procurement of equipment. Something as basic of 5 festivals in a town, everybody's hiring chairs for their individual events, and what, we pool all those resources together, we can buy them and be done with them. Very simple, easy steps that reduce the cost of things. We're all doing health and safety statements, so we're all doing audience development policies and plans, and with that type of work, there's a similarity with some basic elements of reports like that, and then you can focus and niche in then on your individual festival or whatever you need. And I suppose the key thing was that, or is, a problem shared is a problem halved. So, and working together is always a better way of dealing with things. So, like, even we can come together, by coming together, I suppose, if for the borough focus in particular, even if we're looking at things like philanthropic investment, well, isn't it more attractive perhaps to a private company to invest in a series of festivals over a series of time instead of just one 4-day pocket of investment? So, I think, the question of can the sector support its own development by working together? Yes, definitely. But it wouldn't be without its challenges. Time and resources and that side of things would be a real challenge, I think, for a lot of festivals, particularly festivals who are at different times, over the period of the year. One festival is at their height and another is at their kind of, in second or third gear. But, everybody's not always in neutral at the one time. So that's something to be mindful of in particular. But we have a lot to share. We have a lot of knowledge and we have a lot of skills that we can share with each other. And particularly in rural Ireland, there's of no benefit really to keeping your cards close to your chest. I think, being able to share and work with each other and be open and respectful of each other's space, but and share ideas is really important.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of sort of a neat sense of collegiality there and an openness to share.
Absolutely.
That you have found a way of working in and I suppose quite a small context.
Oh, it is. And I suppose to be mindful of, like, Birr is a small town, it's a population of about 5,500 people. It is small.
Yeah. And the theatre itself established 4 of those festivals.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
and that may be the catalyst and the reason that this natural move to work together.
Yeah. And you've told us that, one of the big questions around this would be, who would fund and support, and you've mentioned Offaly
Local Development Company would be very supportive, and certainly the Local Enterprise Office. Now, we haven't engaged with them as a collective, but have identified potentially, they might be able to help us out with this or that, or, particularly if it's a study or a review or a focus document or something to help.
Well, I imagine people in the audience are interested to hear that there is that model there already working in that particular context. And I'm going to move on to Roisin now, who's going to bring us up a scale in terms of size of place, because Roisin is going to talk about Belfast and what she has been involved in there.
Yeah, so is my mic working? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Culture Development Officer in Belfast City Council, and I can see a couple of Belfast people in the audience, so hello. So I help to coordinate the Belfast Festivals Forum. So it's a forum which has been running since 2006. I've been looking after it for about 3 years now. It's a voluntary group of festivals in Belfast. I think in the mailing list we have about 150, but we regularly get around 50 who attend. And Belfast City Council is like the secretariat of the group. We have about 6 meetings per year. So the forum, it was originally set up obviously in 2006, I guess probably similar to how your group has been set up. And it has grown just over time. So the forum is really an important part of my kind of work, because it's almost like provides a kind of like almost like a listening ear for the council, just in some of the what concerns and challenges that people in the festival and the wider arts sector are facing. But it's also important because we try and kind of sit back. We have 2 co-chairs who are kind of elected every, say, 3 or 4 years. Again, people who are drawn up from festivals, who are the co-chairs, so they kind of manage quite a bit of it. So it's not the city council telling the sector what to do. We try and kind of sit back and observe and kind of take it in. I suppose it's a space for people to share different opportunities, for funding opportunities, for networking. It's also a place where we will offer a bit of financial support as well in terms of capacity building. So we would do surveys. We'd run a survey every 2 years and ask about, what needs do you have, and then try and kind of program different talks or speakers or trainers in to do that. We also offer a couple of freebies as well. So for people who come to regular meetings, we will offer free billboards, free flags, also different like social media support as well. And we also run like a clash calendar too, which is actually really important, because now we have so many festivals which are overlapping, especially at really busy periods of the year. So it allows festivals to kind of plan in advance as well, and just make sure that they can, look into maybe sharing resources, or, probably good even in terms of, staff as well. If you need to maybe get someone to do your box office at different times of the year, you can kind of work with other festivals to do that. And it also works to really, we try and showcase it, we move it around, so we showcase different venues across the city as well, and so that we're not just in the one space. And the other thing that we try and do is we also do try and use it for sort of advocacy opportunities as well, because in Belfast and in the north, that is something which comes up quite a lot, is obviously funding and the shortage of it. And so I think it really works quite well to have a group of people in the festival sector who are kind of who are there, if there are any things going on with funding cuts, that at the next forum meeting it'll definitely be mentioned, and people can get their voice together and really plan and think about what they can kind of do collectively, to have some kind of action. So that's a kind of a bit of an overview of the forum.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Roisin. I mean, you're really showing us there an example of a model that has sustained since 2006. I think people will be really interested in how you've managed. And I think you've been really showing us the benefits, and I suppose, you know, the positive benefits, the advocacy seems to me to be important, and, you know, the profiling of the venues, and I suppose the co-creation when we, you know, the city authority sitting back and the festival sector taking ownership, I imagine is probably key to why it has sustained for so long.
Yeah, I think every forum probably over time has its peaks and troughs.
Peaks and troughs, of course.
For sure. But I think it definitely helps with the city council being able to leverage support so that it's in people's interests to, you know, because you're asking people to give up their time to come to it, and there is such a lack of capacity in the sector, you know, but we do try our best to be reactive to people's needs. So, you know, one thing that came up, you know, whenever we've asked people, you know, for capacity building, they're like, well, you know, you're asking people who don't have that much capacity, you know, to go to a capacity event or something like that. But we just try our best, and we try and, you know, we actually had Carl at one of our events recently as well. So we try and make it useful for people.
I mean, I think it's important for people to remember, one of the things Carl said yesterday was that 80% of the festivals funded by the Arts Council are voluntary led. So that's a huge context for us, I think. So from the heights of the city of Belfast and the age, longevity of that initiative, we turn to Craig.
To the heights of Sligo. Yes.
Well, it's more the age.
Okay.
So Craig is going to mention, I imagine, his involvement in a much newer initiative.
Yeah. So my name's Craig Dubose. I am here representing the Sligo Festivals Collective, and ours is a much newer initiative. So we are very much in the process at the moment of creating the entity of the collective. So, you know, constitution, bank account, AGMs, that's sort of the level we are at the moment. But to get back to the question very quickly, can we support our own development through collaboration? It probably won't surprise you to learn that as someone representing a festival collective, I'm going to say yes, we can. And for me, it's all about building capacity through efficiency. You know, we all have limited amount of resources. All the festivals have X amount of money, people, time, whatever it is. So it's about using those resources, people, time, more efficiently so that you can give more stuff to more people, essentially, if I can boil it down to that. So, you know, if we can all get together as a collective, then as we mentioned before, sharing things like chairs. The example I would use would be production equipment, things like stages, PA systems, power systems, lighting. You know, these things are very common to festivals that we have in our town. So sharing those things, leveraging economies of scale. You know, if I can go to somebody, a supplier of some sort, and I say, okay, I represent this one festival, what's your price? They might say it's X amount. But if I go back to them and say, actually, I represent 10 festivals, what's the new price? Hopefully that would be a cheap, whatever it is. Again, this is just a more efficient use of each individual festival's times. So yes, the answer is yes, but, and there's always a but, although each individual festival benefits from this collective sort of action and bargaining, from where I sit, and I know that these two have already said that they their festivals created their collectives, I think, on their own. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm not sure that the incentives are well aligned for, if you have a group, for one of those festivals to say, okay, you know what, we'll create this collective and then we can all benefit. Because again, we all have limited resources. I don't know that the incentives, the benefits are outweigh the costs when it comes to a single individual. And I think this is where local organizations and local councils step in to kind of get these things off the ground. So from our perspective, from Sligo's perspective, I think that the tourism department in the council was hearing from the various festivals that, hey, look, this grant application stuff is kind of cumbersome and difficult, and it's not great. And of course, it behooves the tourism department to support the festivals because they bring in the people and whatever. So one of the things that the tourism department is they got all the festivals together and into a festivals course, as it were, at the local university at ATU Sligo, which was Professor Curnoff. He's here at the moment, but he's here somewhere. But that was great, and as part of that, they said, but that initial cost of getting things off the ground really requires, again, I know that that's not always the case, but if we're talking in large numbers, across the country, we should be thinking in terms of probability, and you really want to make the process as easy as possible. And so I think, yes, local government, local agencies need to get involved to get these things off the ground. Once they do, then it's fine. And the last thing I would say, I mentioned kind of funding. Leader funding is another part of this. I don't know if you guys are well familiar with this. I think I see some heads shaking, so I'll say yes. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. So that's another thing, is that as a collective, we plan on applying for leader funding to pay for some of these things, whether it be shared space, marketing, graphic artists, whatever it may be. And so, leader funding, they pay for 75% and you pay for 25%. So not only efficiency, but also just funding. That is, I don't want to say free money, but it's there to be taken, and as a collective, we can all benefit from it. So yes, the Arts Festival sector can support its own development through collaborative models. Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Okay, between different kind of actors in public and private, in this case, as a way of underpinning a model. Thanks, Craig. So Emily now is going to, I think, give us a perspective as a festival person, and as somebody who's with being involved in a festival of ideas and innovation and creativity. Will have something to say on this, idea of new ways of working or different ways of working. Thank you, Emily.
Well, first of all, I have to say I am somewhat so I'm sitting here with my salubrious colleagues and blown away by what you've achieved and where you're coming from. Don't have a theatre or good public transport. So we really set out to make life difficult for ourselves. But what I learned as part of it was that the magic of bringing people together is phenomenal, and what you can achieve and the experience that you can bring, regional economic development, it's really, really powerful, and it's something that I'm committed to. The fact that I'm doing it for no money is clearly not sustainable, and it doesn't lend itself to long-term thinking. I'll just have to be stupid for a while more, I think. But one of the things I am also is a thief. And so what I have done, and what my colleagues at Resonance have done, is to steal ideas from other people, like the wonderful people in this room. And so one of the things we did after a few years, we're 5 years in now, but we moved from September, which is very crowded, to February, which is less crowded. And we run midweek because we don't have bed nights, even though bed nights is what funding is often linked to. But overcoming these challenges, these frustrations, one of the things that we did was recognize that our peers in the festival industry, like the people in this room, are so good, so kind, so generous with their knowledge, with their ideas, with their supports. And so we started to steal ideas from other festivals so that we could actually learn from them. And last September, we gathered a bunch of people together that we had met, that we connected with, and we had something called Unconvention, a completely unfunded, volunteer-led gathering of movers and shakers from all of the different areas that we had connected with. And we brought everyone together to learn and share and grow. And actually, you're right, the Clash calendar, absolutely brilliant idea. Why can't we share what's happening, what's going on? So one of the things I learned from that was that there is absolutely a need for this idea of that connection. And I use the metaphor of the body. If anyone else has a bad back, you'll learn a lot about fascia. And fascia is this interconnective tissue that holds everything together. It doesn't pull in any, if you're healthy, it doesn't pull in any one direction. It supports everything. And what I recognized almost immediately is that in Ireland, our systems are not connected. So we have the fascia of the Arts Council, we have the fascia of Fáilte Ireland, but these are separate systems that don't connect with each other, that don't actually support holistically. And so we have disconnects, and we have entities that don't fit in one place or another. And one of the, if people haven't read it already, there's an excellent article written by Nisha Nunn of multiple festivals, including Kilconomics, which was featured in the Examiner this week. And he talks about precisely this, that from a funding perspective, that different strategies are pulling our organisations and our networks in different directions. And there are many organisations, and I see people nodding, and we are falling between the cracks. And this is shocking, because there's so much talent and remarkability and expertise and goodwill, and we're pulling in different directions. And this sucks. So the idea of a national network, the idea of actually all of us pulling together, phenomenal. And if we can learn from entities that are doing it really well, that have already brought obvious, brilliant ideas to life, then let's share and grow. And the question is, how do we do this in a way that's completely connected, in a way that's holistic, in a way that's supportive of all and not pulling in one direction over another, is going to be a challenge. And I think days like this will really move us forward. And the ability to steal ideas. Yeah. So hopefully I can come away being an expert thief today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Emily. I've been sitting here listening, and the first three contributions have been very, very positive. But, I know that nothing is ever perfect. Festivals are always hotly contested kind of landscapes. So you've opened up a couple of realities, for us there. But you pulled out the generosity and the collegiality spirit, the collegiate spirit that you experienced firsthand in the sector. And I think that's really an interesting comment that you made, because people in the sector a long time mightn't even recognise it or acknowledge it as a strength. And it's probably a strength, to be put on the table and looked at and said, how can we build on this? This is a strength that we have as a sector. Liam, I'm going to come to you now, because if we build the capacity of festivals, then we build the capacity of place, and I think you're interested in strong places. So can you give us a few thoughts on the discussion?
Yeah, so I am somewhat of an outlier here. I might even be the anti-fascia in some ways. There's wordplay I wanted to get in there. Now it is a bit shoehorned, I'll accept. I work with the Western Development Commission, and I work on the Connected Hubs programme. So if I could bore people a little bit about that. The Western Development Commission is concerned with the regional economic development of the 7 counties, including Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim, Roscommon, Mayo, Galway and Clare, right down to the border of the next region, which is in Killaloo, where the Residence Festival is. So
you gave us a bit of funding, actually.
We do indeed. Thank you. So
Thanks.
That's my first effort at establishing my bona fide. And I also then work on the Connected Hubs project, which is a national project. It's not the Western Development Commission have the national remit for this. So Connected Hubs are all those co-working hubs that you might know in your local villages and towns. We've all of those organised, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment because I think there's a parallel. We've all of those organised into a coherent sector now, with a platform called connectedhubs.ie, with a network and various sub-networks within that meet regularly, and we have a national hub summit, etc. The point I would make is that 5 years ago, there was none of that. So today seems a bit embryonic sounding in terms of building collaboration, etc. 5 years ago, Connected Hubs was a disorganised, disparate sector. It almost wasn't a sector, all those co-working hubs. And thanks to government funding primarily, but also the work of all those people in all of those hubs, a sector was created with the potential to advocate for the sector. There have been a number of funding programs run through what Connected Hubs does as well. And I think I know we're going to talk about regional later on. I'm not going to harp on it now, but the question talks about, can people working together achieve things? Yes, they can. But I would say from various experiences I have, it's not inevitable that it will work. In fact, I often talk about that whole one-stop shop type approach often just creates another Google. another, and I mean Google, the search engine as opposed to the company, another layer that actually confuses rather than simplifies. That's one thing I would always say, that, you know, for example, we do a lot of work in the whole area of supporting people with startup ideas, etc. And everywhere we go, people say, oh, is all that information available in one place? Yes, and if we create, it's not, but if we create that place, that's one more layer you've got to work through, you know, so not to think that organising together is a panacea for all our ills. It can actually be quite the opposite sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something that should be brought to bear.
Yeah.
I suppose just from the Western Development Commission side of things, we have been involved in supporting a number of festivals, including the Yeats celebrations in 2015. We have Sligo Choral Festival, Westborough Music Festival, which are not strictly art festivals, but everybody's has been mentioning Leader and all these places, and that's the reality. You've got to go and individually or collectively access all of these boring places where the money actually is. And I was delighted when Craig was talking, the people were nodding their heads that they know all of this, because it would be lovely if that didn't have to be done and money miraculously fell out of the sky into your lap and away you go because it's a good thing to do. It's just not that simple. And I think that's where when you bring expertise together like has been done here. And by the way, the imposter syndrome I feel here is way ahead of what you feel, Emily. So, but you know, when you see what's been done since 2006 or more recently, it does show what is possible. Within the Connected Hubs area that we work in, just to kind of flag some of that, the Marie Edgeworth's Festival was on in Edgeworthstown last weekend. The local hub there, CoWorks, hosted an art exhibition as part of that festival. And hubs do that all around the country. Next weekend, the Night and Day Festival is on in Boyle, and the local hub there has got a package to try and encourage people to come a day early and stay a day late, perhaps. So that kind of thing is available to arts festivals. I go to Clifton Arts Festival every year, and I would probably do a few more days there if there actually was a hub really nearby that I could, you know, mainly because my wife actually needs it more than I do. I can work slightly more, but she works in an area where she has to have good broadband and a kind of secure network. But that kind of thing is what I think festivals should be thinking about, is that the likes of your local hub. So like in Stranorlar, the local hub is the starting point for parts of the walking festival. You know, there's all sorts of things that can be done when you tie up with all sorts of agencies like ourselves. So I'm not sure, does that add to the body of knowledge in any way?
Definitely does. I mean, I think, you know, you're encouraging us to think more broadly. You know, you're introducing us to a new resource that some of us may not have ever thought about before. A real resource, a physical resource, as well as a funding resource. And another kind of mechanism that could play a role in bringing people together. I might actually open it to the floor at this point. I'm sure people want to come in. Do we have a roving mic? Just shoot the hand up there if anybody would like to make a comment. Yes, thank you very much. And you might introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hanlon. We're from Longford, working on a couple of festivals there. I'm just curious about this clash calendar. Do you have it just specifically for Belfast, or are you working on an All-Ireland one?
It's just really for Belfast. Our forum, we do actually open it up for festivals outside of Belfast as well, but to be honest, that just is really ones nearby. So they are also welcome to attend the forum, but they kind of don't get the freebies necessarily because it's the Belfast money. But I mean, I think the Clash calendar is really valuable, not just for the festivals. Actually, I forgot to mention this actually, just not just for the festivals and their planning, but it's also, I guess, see, as a city council, it helps us to also disseminate that information too. So we often get requests, you know, for our, you know, yearly calendar, or like if there's a print publication going out, what's going on at this time of year. We can have all that information. It's ready to go. It also means if there's like sometimes we get like different, you know, there will be some, I don't know, like a dignitary or something like that, or someone important is coming over from like a different country. What's going on? We can say, well, all these festivals are happening, you know, so it offers something interesting, you know, to them. But we do just work on a Belfast regional kind of area, but like that's a brilliant idea, you know, for something kind of going forward, like definitely, you know.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Can I jump in?
yeah.
Quick?
Please, Craig.
So as far as I know, there's no national calendar of festivals, but I think probably the organization best place to do something like that would be FLUX Ireland. I mean, they have a calendar,
Yeah.
but you have to submit your own event. So I mean, it's not going to be it's not going to cover everybody because you have to do your own thing.
Yeah.
But if there were going to be something sort of national calendar, I'd imagine it would be through FLUX Ireland.
And actually, so
Yeah,
we
please.
at Unconvention, it came up, this would be bloody useful, but actually not in terms of what's scheduled, but forward planning. So when we were moving from September to February, we were doing it because September was too crowded. And actually, the ability to be able to have, and Lord knows nobody needs another WhatsApp group, but like if there was a place where we could be like, well, we're thinking about moving from September to February. Does anyone else know what's happening in February? Does anyone else have any thoughts on it? And really, it was just that manual kind of doing it all like by hand, or rather by phone call. Yeah. But yes, if there was a national forum, this is exactly the kind of thing that would be really handy.
Yeah, I mean, I think FLUX Ireland used to do one of those, or maybe it was even Board Fáilte. There used to be a festival of calendar. But I mean, things have moved on, so there must be technology that can enable us to have a more live and up-to-date set of information about festivals, which I think is so important as well for coming back to something Emily said, you know, this advocacy thing and making the sector visible, you know, making it visible to many actors. And I think which would help with the National Festival Forum idea that Carl also talked about yesterday, if that recommendation gets followed through on, just raising the visibility of the sector and having it seen by others as an actual sector. Eddie.
My name is Eddie McGuinness. I run the Outing...
Eddie!
Yes. The Queer Arts Collective. We 14 years of running our festival, originally in Lisdoonvarna as part of the Matchmaking Festival. Then we moved it to Mullen. This year we actually moved it to Ennis for the very, very first time. With that, but within the remit of the 14 years is the evolution of bringing all a separate matter but an overlap, because the prides around the island of Ireland, there is now 37 different prides which give a platform for queer artists and performers to actually perform on one day. And even while I'm texting here, I'm actually organising a stage for Athlon's first ever Pride event, where we actually have 11 queer artists and performers performing in one day. But the whole idea of the Outing Queer Arts Collective as an extension of the festival itself was a resource of equipment, of PA, staging, lighting, inflatables, flags, you name it. We actually all have that now in a big, massive container in Dublin. But with very little funding, we keep it going. And we've been doing that now for 14 years. But our evolution only in the last 3 to 4 months was to bring together, and we did it for our first ever conference, which was over 40 people from those Pride conferences to come together and to make a proper collective or a network of festivals on the island of Ireland. But that also means that the tentacles of Pride can actually go into other festivals on the island of Ireland. And we all know they're all there, the performers, the artists, you name it, are all there. And I think that's something which is...
So that's another really good example to know about of a collaborative activity.
And FLUX Ireland do have a list on their site of all the festivals, but most of it is out of date because, again, you have to go in and put it in yourself.
Yeah, but it's really good to know, Eddie, thanks, that example. Yeah, sorry, Emily?
One quick point. I don't know if this is national, but I know that FLUX very recently in collaboration with the Regional Tourism Ireland's Hidden Heartlands, launched Festival in a Box. And this idea of shared tools, equipment, flags. And the idea is the Festival in a Box, you submit a request, you get the box. You get the box, and then you give the box back.
Right. Yeah, good. Yeah. Was there another question? Yeah.
FLUX, it's Misha Giroud-Teven from Healing Spirit Festival. And thank you to the panel. And the question to the panel would be, do you think that it's oversaturated, festivals throughout Ireland? That there needs to be a rethink of how we could collaborate more into an efficient 1 or 2 festivals in each county, that we're not draining or expecting people to go, like Emily, you mentioned September. September is a very busy month for festivals throughout Ireland, and people are trying to decide which to go to. Yeah, I feel it'd be more efficient to have less, and by doing less, you're going to have more connectiveness and people involved in a specific event, festival, where you collaborate with all the elements that Emma, you were saying about different threads of skill sets and talents all in one event, rather than having a multiple festivals in the same town or village.
Oh, okay, that's a yeah, a tricky one. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, it is tricky to, you know, and I suppose just from a Burr focus, and I mean, which is a very small little puddle in a big huge pool, but you know, Burr Vintage Week and Arts Festival was running 58 years now, and it's only in the last. The next youngest or the next oldest festival is 20 years. So there was this big gap for a long time where the people of Burr and the surrounding region had one festival and one thing to attend once a year. And actually it even became an internal joke ourselves that when the gathering happened, and we're like, sure, we've been doing the gathering for years. So everybody comes home for the first week in August. We've been doing it for years. But there certainly was a sense of, so what do we do for the rest of the year? What happens? So, like, we're about, like, even yesterday I did the final proof of our playwriting festival, which is happening in July, the 1st, what our dates are, the 2nd to the 5th. And then, you know, then there's another break, and then we have Burr Vintage Week and Arts Festival, and then it moves to our film festival and our children's arts festival, and then the year comes back around. But there certainly had been... certainly, they're not all concentrated in the one period of time. So the strategic idea is that we stretch it out across the year, so the people in the town and the community and visitors coming into the area will have choice and option of different variety, really. Yeah.
Anybody else want to?
I'd love to have a good row, because I disagree with the proposal entirely. So maybe we can argue at the bar, but so. The logic is there, but in my opinion, and I'm probably going to disagree with like a lot of people on this, we need more small, interesting, high caliber things as opposed to less big, broad things. Do you know what are brilliant? Small things, small airports rather than big airports, small concerts rather than big concerts. Like the experience, the connection, like what you get out of something that's small and perfectly formed, in my opinion, is much better than something that's broader and bigger and more agglomerated. And so instead of 5 or 6 unicorns, we need 1,000 tiny horses. I want to be able to go to something small and amazing every weekend in every part of Ireland throughout the year, as opposed to Paddy's Festival once a year. Now, we need that too. Obviously, the country of Ireland needs that too. And I'm really interested, and I'm very supportive of our positioning as the home of Halloween. It's smart, it's brilliant, it leans into the weather, hell yes. But also, why can't we have like incredibly cool niche festivals around mindfulness and wellness and nature-based connectivity and AI and innovation and creativity all going on? I think there's room for all of us if we have the right connective tissue.
Thank you. Thank you. Liam wants to come in on that as well.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that festivals can reach, if they get to sort of regional in some ways, that you could miss the unintended or unexpected or unlikely audiences as well. So in my town of Ballinrobe, we have done a few things like a culture night. We've done a pop-up street festival. We had 3 art exhibitions on one street on one day. I think festivals come and go, people come and go. There's a time for a group to do something. Right. And I think that sense of, I mean, I remember years ago going to the Player Rock at Connemara Festival, which, as I recall, it was an end-of-season, kind of shoulder-season festival, primarily for the locals who had spent the whole summer looking after the tourist industry. And I think, like, again, back in my town, in Ballinrobe, we're trying to build out our town hall. We bought a local hotel. We're trying to convert it into a town hall, and we're deep in discussions with the Department of Rural and Community Development and Gaeltacht now. But from that and some other things that are happening, there's an arts festival about to happen in Ballinrobe, I can tell you. But I think if we were in some ways precluded from doing that, I think that'd be a bad day. And I think, particularly because we can get people to go to events in Ballinrobe that may not go to the Headfest in Headford, or may not go to the Clifton Arts Festival or something in the Linen Hall in Castlebar. I would be.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. And is this a different question?
I just want to say, like, the joy of finding a festival where it's your kind of people and you feel a sense of belonging, and that is amazing. I'm from Puddlefest in Wexford, and tomorrow there's a Rock Gorman festival, a tiny little music festival that I'm going to, because I know they're my kind of people there. So I think the smaller, more of the smaller, the better, for sure.
Yeah, okay. Now, I'm actually going to come back to the panel, and we will open to the floor in a little while.
I just asked you, do you travel together here with it, or you just have it together? Okay.
And I'm going to come to you first then. So, okay, so we're going to come now. We have agreed, which is fantastic, that collaborative working is good, and we like that idea. But now, of course, the question is, how and where. So the question now I'm going to ask everybody to give us some thoughts on is, is there value then in thinking about this capacity building through collaboration at a regional level? And Liam, we said we'd start with you this time, didn't we?
Yeah, I think, yes, there is, of course, people working together well. I think also, and Eddie touched on this as well, and we chatted about it before the panel started, it may not just be based on geography or region. It may be based on genre, interest, etc. I think that's the trick, to try and incorporate both. And you can have both. I mean, you can have genre and region together as well. And I'm sure that might even be happening in your collective, Eddie, where it makes sense that I don't have to bring the stuff from Skibbereen to Monaghan Town. You know what I mean? If I only have to bring it to Charleville, isn't that better? Whatever stuff you're sharing. So I think it does make sense. I'm fascinated by where certain things emerge. So, for example, Birr, a famous town in Offaly, has its own collective, and in some ways is Birr now a region, and why not? In other instances, the county sort of identity is very strong. And I would say maybe to find what works. So, for example, as far as I know anyway, most county councils have an arts office, and they have a county-wide remit. I'd say, actually, I published my first novel last year, and Mayo County Library has just picked it as a book for Mayo for next year. So I'm deliberately plugging that whole county.
Wow.
And actually, my book deals with a small town trying to build its own community/civic centre to bring events happening locally. That's one of the key topics of it. It's called On the Way Out. It retails at €15. But I don't want to besmirch this commercially today. But so I think there are existing brands, for the want of a better word, or existing structures that can be tapped into. But also there should be that freedom to have non-existing structures. So, for example, we didn't have the Wild Atlantic Way 10 years ago. That's clearly now something that's almost non-existing, if you know what I mean. It's not bound by any local authority or regional assembly. We talked as well, Eddie brought it up there, but the sort of genre or sector-specific stuff. But I think it can work. We certainly have seen, within the Connected Hubs project, that even though we're a national network, local things work well as well. Often ad hoc come and go a little bit, and that's fine too. Not every entity is going to last as long as the Belfast one. And in some ways that's fine too, because in the nature of this sector, it's experimental in some ways. It's like, we tried this, it worked, we tried that, it didn't work. You know what I mean? And fail again kind of thing. So I think, yes, the answer is yes. We would see in the Connected Hubs, we would really like to be involved through our constituent hubs, all of which are owned individually. We don't own a single hub, but we are getting from our hub members a real interest in the arts. Like, we've an Art in the Hubs programme where the Contemporary Irish Art Society give long-term loans of 2 pieces of art to hubs as long as they display them in public areas. Some of our hubs have done exhibitions. I mentioned Edgeworthstown last weekend. The GTEC Iraha Kundana Kiri has done an exhibition as well in recent times. So in some ways, to look, I mentioned in Ballinrobe we did the Glebe Fest Festival. We had 3 art exhibitions, one in an old bank that's no longer being used, one actually in an art gallery, and one in a career training business. And that's where that was, you know. So to not just look at all of this in a kind of predictable way, look at it predictably and unpredictably and see where it goes, I think. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Liam. Can I just ask you, I probably should know this, the Connected Hubs, I know you said it's a national project, but do they sit under any regional clusters?
Yeah, they have their own. They've all, like, there's a Kerry group that meets. There's a Midlands collective.
All right,
but they're all equal in the eyes of our platform. It's one national platform. There's 414 or 15 of them there today.
Yeah.
They're owned by community groups, higher education institutions, local authorities, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But by and large, and something that the Minister Dara Calleary challenged us at our summit last year in Ballinasloe was start really thinking about how these hubs can become the word hub in a broader sense. You know, so for example, and it's not strictly relevant here, but if the government wants to do a climate change initiative, for example, how do they roll that out into small towns and parishes around Ireland? One time they might have been able to use a post office structure, perhaps, or schools do schools, sports clubs do sports, but the hubs are there available to do and are looking for things to do to roll things out. So, and art, we've certainly been promoting art in the hubs, learning in the hubs, and all of that. So there is something there that might be worth looking at regionally, locally, whatever.
Yeah, I definitely think there's lots of potential for festivals and cultural actors to think about the hubs, definitely. Emily?
So, regional thinking. So, there's pros and cons, right? Because what you want is, you want place-specific, but you don't want narrow-minded thinking. And so, on the one hand, you can get a bunch of stakeholders together with shared needs and wants, where you can collaborate, and at the same time, you could end up spending 3 hours in a room talking about what kind of filling should go into the Loch Derg sandwich. So...
What did you decide?
Ham. So there's pros and cons. What I would say is, and the Wild Atlantic Way is a really good example. It wasn't defined before, and John Kincannon, amazing human being, brought about the Wild Atlantic Way and the Gathering. And I think there is a lot to be said for ignoring the rules. There's a lot to be said for ignoring the boundaries. So where we are, I say Killaloo, but it's actually Killaloo Balna. It's 2 counties, and there's Limerick on the fringes as well. So we bend every rule to try and be a place that benefits from multiple counties. And, you know, we tap into as many resources as possible. Rather than waiting to be invited to whatever supports are there, go make them, go find them, invent the place, create the Wild Atlantic Way. And what I think about the regional benefits, well, first of all, show me the money. Like, at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of funding to actually create the tools and the energy in order to bring these things together, the fascia, right? But you don't want narrow-minded or perhaps inexperienced entities trying to make decisions when they don't have domain expertise. So there's this tension immediately. So how can you tap into the benefits of the local stakeholders without being beholden to the petrol pump politics of local needs? So it's really, really challenging. But what I would say is, when you have a room full of those stakeholders, try and think about cross-pollination, try and think about beyond just your niche. Because if you're sitting in a room with, and for example, where I am, there's a outdoor splash centre. So very little to do with the type of talks and events that we're putting on. But they have a huge database of people who have booked and travelled to come to that location. And so there's opportunities for us to cross-market. And it's about finding the tiny area of overlap between bouncing in a wetsuit and going to the pub to talk about astrophysics. And if you can find those areas of overlap, you can find a way to collaborate effectively to pull together. And I talked about being a thief. So in a former life, I was head of fundraising at UNICEF. And so I think deeply about cause-related marketing. And actually, it's about finding mutually beneficial ways to help each other. Because we're all good and kind and lovely. But at the end of the day, we all have a lot of stuff to do, right? But if what's good for me is also what's good for you, then there's a much greater chance of that actually continuing and moving long term. So yes, go sit in a room, talk about sandwiches, but while you're there, find reasons to help someone else and for them to help you. And then you actually have sustainable regional economic benefit long term. And before I pass the mic, I have to explain how I know Eddie McGuinness, because I haven't seen him in 20 years. But the last time I did, I was standing on stage with a bucket of paraffin and he was holding a fire extinguisher.
Teamwork.
So, yes, long time. Hiya. Yeah.
You both survived. Thank you, Emily. There's lots of thoughts there. So both of you, Liam and yourself, are saying, think outside of the box. Don't be necessarily defined by what a region might be. And there's a freedom there, I think, which is great, because we're looking at you three, and they're quite different sort of places. So that's great. So to think about that, Craig, I wonder if you can give us some thoughts.
Sure. So talking about capacity, is there value in capacity building through regional collaboration? So I think we established in the first question, absolutely, I think my point was that through the more efficient use of resources, you can build capacity. You use things more efficiently, you provide more bang for buck. So the question is to look at that through the lens of regional collaboration. I think I would look at this more in the negative case, in the sense that, yes, of course, festivals can collaborate, but there's going to be a geographic limit to where that makes sense. And so things that I talked about in the first question, sharing things like physical assets, like lighting and staging and barriers and whatever, or maybe applying for funding for shared marketing in local media channels, right? Those make sense up to a certain geographic limit. And I'm not here to define what that is, but for every mile or kilometer that you add distance between two festivals, I'd say there's some sort of drop in value. Again, I'm not here to give you a number on that, but there's no point in me sharing resources, physical resources, with a festival in Dublin. The cost to get tables and chairs across the country is going to make the whole thing not really worthwhile. So, what these geographic limits are, I certainly can't say, but, there's good parts, obviously, about working locally, but beyond a certain point, it just doesn't make sense. Some things, there are some things that are not physical. If we talk about things like marketing, or maybe having a graphic designer that does work for the collective, digital administration. Those are obviously things that are not location dependent, but I'm not convinced that that those alone will be sufficient to maintain the usefulness of a collective across the country, for example. So I guess the short answer for me is, yes, of course, within a limited geographic area, regional collaboration makes perfect sense, but there's going to be some sort of limit to that, because beyond that, you lose any sort of benefit that you're getting from working together in the first place.
So the definition of the extent of this collective has to make sense, and there has to be mutually beneficial reasons for people to be part of it.
All the festivals in Sligo are going to encounter the same sort of international travel issues, in sense of, yes, we have Knock Airport, and that's great, but maybe the public transport from Knock to other parts of the county isn't great. Dublin, for example, they're not going to have that same problem. And so, we're going to be encountering different, there will be some common issues, but I'd say not enough to make it worthwhile.
I'm just saying that actually, thinking of collectives, why can't we have more than just festivals? venues, entities, activities, any stakeholder. It could be a media organisation, it could be a local newspaper, it could be any entity that has any reason to be in the room. That collectivism can be so much broader than just the festivals. And actually, if we think about that, the cross-pollination can be much greater.
Yeah. Yeah, we had brought that up earlier, that idea, you know, is it a good idea just for festivals to be talking to festivals? Because I think it was Kate who said yesterday they don't always necessarily actually talk to festivals. They might talk to a theatre, or they work really, really closely with an arts centre. And of course then they work with all these other actors as well. So, you know, that's another complication to throw into the mix that would make more sense perhaps in particular kinds of contexts. So, I mean, this is complex. There's no question about it. There's no straightforward solution. Roisin.
So I think it's interesting because obviously Belfast, I don't know if it's a region. I suppose you would be thinking about, you know, the north as a region maybe potentially. Belfast is obviously, it's a city of, I think it's 650,000 people-ish. And as a city, I suppose we have our own unique challenges, and like, to be honest, sometimes we are very siloed looking, you know, and almost like, you know, to be honest, a lot of the time I've seen this in my own, you know, organisation. We almost look across the water as opposed to looking down south, which is a real like missed opportunity, I think.
Well, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Well, thank
because
you
we're
for
learning
having
a lot
me.
from
I
you.
know.
It's great.
It's really lovely to be here and to connect with you all. But yeah, we have done, like, within our forum, we have, you know, part of our surveys, there has been a real desire indicated from the forum members to have more connection with the South. And that's also from like a programming perspective as well, to be part of like the sort of circuits that exist, you know, for their artists, and, you know, because of Brexit and everything else that's kind of going on, you know. But there is a desire to have more connections, certainly, like, you know, of, you know, different festival directors and things like that across the whole island. And I suppose we're very siloed, so we don't necessarily think about things like that. But I think, you know, with this concept that you're throwing around, like, it's a really interesting opportunity. You know, there's a desire, like, I would love for us to connect more with, if it was, I don't know, anywhere, but especially with the opportunity of potential shared island funding, you know, that's coming up now. And again, with Belfast, we're not a border, we're not, you know, border county, so we're sort of a bit like, okay, we would like to maybe look at shared island or something like that, but we don't really know where to start sometimes.
I mean, I think if we do have collectives of any kind of size or scale, those collectives, it's easier for them to connect with other collectives than individuals connected with individuals. So I think once you get this idea of collectivities in people's minds, you know, there's a huge possibility for layering it up spatially. You know, like Belfast can be. I think Belfast. You know, it's a city region, and we can go, like, there's no answers on size here. You know, we can go from small to larger, and we can connect them all. Then,
and I think as well, just going back to what you were saying, Craig, about capacity building. Like, it's obviously it's not always just about that physical kind of infrastructure. Like, some of the things that we're talking about are things on, like, affecting our members, whether it's like, you know, mental health and things like that, and being able to offer, you know, that affects festival directors, like in Belfast and Dublin, like in Cork, everywhere, you know, or the challenges of fundraising, like even, you know, there's other training that we can do on that would be beneficial. That's also like a form of capacity.
And there are other organisations out there, I'm thinking Minding Creative Minds, other organisations out there that would very naturally, you know, hook in. Emma?
Well, a lot of, I agree with like, do you all read my notes beforehand? But I suppose the key thing is the mutually beneficial, and, you know, that there's no point in being a member of a collective or a part of it unless there's going to be some give and take, I think. You know, be it that there's a shared requirement to resolve a shared challenge, or there's, you want to share, you share a mutual interest in going in whatever particular direction, or whatever the issue is. But I, when we talk about regions, I think my concern would be, let's not define exactly what the region is. So just because you're an Offaly festival, it's not necessarily Offaly. Because it depends on the location of the member organisations of the collection or the collective, or what's there, and certainly I'm very mindful that we would have a huge amount of audience in Burr. We're in the south of Offaly, so we have a lot of audience, more so from North Tipperary and East Galway than we would from North Offaly. So that's very important to be aware of. I think somebody as well used the phrase yesterday, test before you invest. So
yes.
I think I wrote it down as
Queenway Square.
It was, and I thought,
Sligo,
really good to do that instead of just make an assumption. But test the waters, and I think if a region has an established, in the blue sky 5 years' time or 10 years' time, whatever it is, and if another organisation that might be more miles away or more, they kind of think, why do you want to be part of us? But actually there could be something else that they can bring to the table and share. Maybe you could find that we could be members of one or two regions. We all don't need to be everything, but you could spoke out here, spoke out there, but I think the key thing is that everybody has a mutual interest and target.
What you're making me think about is that, regional hubs, the hub bit seems perfectly fine. Yeah. We're happy with the collective
the hub
thing.
Part, yeah.
The region bit, we're not really quite sure about. Yeah. That's the complex bit. But we're agreeing that the hub collective idea is a very, very good one. Mm-hmm. But quite how to...
I'd be wary about jumping straight in.
Yeah.
I think just, dip your toe in, get the ankle in, start, instead of just go straight into the deep end.
But, this was a recommendation in that research that Carl reported yesterday. So I'm having the sense that it's definitely worth investigating the idea of hubs that are not, it's not like one national hub. It's another kind of hub where people with shared interests in the spirit of collectivity and shared benefits come together, but just quite what that might be. And it could be several different things, perhaps. Does anybody else on the panel want to come back in with a thought before I go out to the floor? Liam?
Just say one thing on that. So to go back to the connected hubs, which might be a parallel. When we were formed with all these hubs operating independently around the country, and what we had to do to make sure that the whole idea worked was to allow them to retain their identity exactly as it was. We offered another level above that. We interfered with nobody's identity in terms of their logo, their branding, their taglines, whatever they did, their pricing. So that was really important that within that collective, for the want of a better word, they still retain that freedom. And in that way, they're happy to wear two hats, or maybe three hats, because prepare the face to meet the faces that you meet. One day they're a connected hubs thing. Another day, for example, we have Údarasta Gaelta have a series of GTECs down along the west coast and in the Gaeltacht areas in other parts of the country. They have a GTEC brand, they have their own local brand, they have our brand, and it can work quite well, but you have to respect the local, I think, very much, because you're not going to impose on people and kill the local. That will kill everything.
Yeah. And actually that taps into this idea of connection without trying to steer. And so by building bridges and connecting the units without trying to control or force. And if a regional hub is a way to tap into a national network, if a regional hub is a doorway to the full collective, then rather than it being a point of friction or a gatekeeper, it's accessibility. And the idea of not creating or overlaying your ethos from a regional perspective makes a lot of sense.
I mean, some of those ideas could be, core values or core ideas to be tossed around if serious discussion was to be had about this. I think you're absolutely right, that core identity idea must be preserved, because often when we look at collaboration, some people don't want to collaborate because they're territorial but you're making me feel that the festival sector is fantastically friendly and open, but I'm not sure if it is. I mean, people have to protect hard-earned resources and hard-won grants and things.
This morning I was driving here and there was a lady walking from the hotel, and I rolled down my window and said, you look like you're walking to the model. And she went, I am. So she got in the car, and it was a lady called Grania who runs the Dublin Film Festival. And in the 10 minutes we were in the car together, she gave me 3 names, 3 ideas. She was so open. She was so brilliant. And one of the things that she said to me really stuck in my mind. She said she was on a panel at another event a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying to the MC, you're asking all these questions that are doom and gloom. We are fabulous. We are sexy. We are amazing. We are the most talented, innovative, creative, that we are the life force of creativity in this country, and we should be able to recognize that in ourselves. And it was just I walked in here with a spring in my step going, God, like, we're great. And actually...
And creating a collective could be a way of bringing that up and celebration of the sector's
But
strength.
everyone I've met in the last 4.5 years on this journey, in this space, has been overworked, underpaid, and incredibly generous.
That's it. We've got to work on the overworked, underpaid. Craig,
can I just take us off on a tangent very quick? Something you mentioned that made me think. We talk a lot about collaboration between the various festivals and whatnot, but funding, as you just mentioned, that's as a collective, that's fine. But other than as individual festivals, that's a sum-zero game. There's an X amount of money to be won there, and we are competitors in that sense. So yes, collaborating, that's all great, but it's not all going to be collaboration. There is competition. I mean, obviously, well, for Sligo, nothing overlaps within the town, but certainly there will be areas that will be competing with festivals outside of our area. And competing for grants. We're all competing for the same amount of money. So
maybe
we collaborate, but we also compete.
Maybe we need some collaborative funding.
As a collective, we'll be applying for leader funding for these collective resources we've been talking about.
But even for festivals to work together, or festivals and our centres to work together. I'm going to throw... sorry, Emma, go.
No, just to come back as well, just from talking about our resources and what we time is the big one. And I'm really conscious that so many, back to the 80%, are voluntary-led. So people come out of their 9-to-5 day job and then,
give up their holidays.
Get the dinner on, feed the kids, put them to bed, and then start into your festival activity on the laptop. So I think we need to be really mindful of, getting really sucking the life out of everybody.
Okay, I'm going to go to the floor again, and the blue jacket. Yes. First, yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Edel. I'm the Sligo Nighttime Economy Advisor. I think it kind of touches upon something Eddie was talking about, and also Emily was referencing as well. Sometimes magic is made by art centres, artists, or festivals. But because of logistics, storage or transport, beautiful things are essentially broken down and something else is remade. But something that has brought wonder in, say, Mayo could bring wonder in Roscommon. But there's the whole thing of storage and transport. And I wonder if you have tapped into it, have heard of it, or potential, joint up thinking to maybe look at that as something that just spread the magic further beyond where it first came from. Just wondering what you guys thought around that. Thanks.
Any reactions to that?
Well, I suppose that's a little bit where touring even, if something, and maybe probably like while a production or a concept, plans to tour, that plan happens from day one as opposed to maybe that one-off, God, that's so brilliant. We really need to share this out and let this move, So I'm glad to.
And actually, you just reminded me. So one of our vendors is a company called Star Systems, and they basically they hire out a lot of their gear. And what they said was that they noticed that this is like that. Joined up thinking was missing because they're doing the same thing for people who don't know each other. So he actually has gone and built a database of freelance sound guys and technicians and blah, 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 and also an index of all the gear that everyone needs.
Right.
So you can actually start to not only connect with each other, but connect via the guys that are on the ground doing the work.
Right.
And I'm looking at the guys at the back here going, they probably know who I'm talking about. But, and they're nodding. But yeah, so Star Systems is his company's name, but Declan.
Okay. All right, lady there in the, I think, All right.
Fáilte Ireland a few years back tried to do this as an initiative, part of St. Patrick's Day in Dublin, as a collective, working, even myself as on my creative side, working as one of the creative directors. They had a warehouse, they had the space, they had the rigs, everything all together, and they were then upcycled, recycled, and repurposed. But unfortunately, down to, again, money and facilities, that actually has gone from a big, massive warehouse right down to just storage. And only this year, unfortunately, we've had to actually get rid of a lot of props and content as well. And that is the problem.
Sustaining things is a real issue. The one beside you there, yes, thank you. I'll come to you.
Hello, I'm Caroline Conway. I am the Artistic Director of Longford Lights, and I Vintage Beacon Arts Festival, so I'm a member of Emma's collective, or our collective, I should say. But I just wanted to talk about regions and the Midlands, which is sometimes referred to as the hole in the donut. And we're here in Sligo, which is fantastic, but I noticed on that map, like how long it takes everybody to get to Sligo. It's a long time, because the Midlands is so lacking in infrastructure, practitioners, where this, like the idea of, and it's kind of happened because I'm working at a festival at either end of the Midlands, that we are collaborating. We have a guy from Night and Day Festival, and we actually have co-commissioned a beautiful sculpture this year between the three festivals. But it's within the Midlands that you have to collaborate. You have to work across and talk to other people and pull people in, because we're ill-served in infrastructure and...
So this cultural scarcity is encouraging the cooperation. Thank you. Kate, and then I'm coming down here.
Hi, I'm Kate Kennelly from Kerry County Council. Liam, a question for you. Am I correct in saying you said the hubs are funded through the Western Development Commission?
No, the hubs are all individually owned, etc. The Western Development Commission oversees the platform and the network that supports the whole thing. So it's the Department of Rural and Community Development and Gaeltacht. They fund the platform, they fund 5 people to work on the project. So, no, they're owned by all types, including Kerry County Council.
Okay, so in terms, if we were to look at developing a festival hub for the county, which is a huge region, we would be accessing funding. It would be the Southern Regional Assembly, Leader, the council, the usual.
So you wouldn't be coming. So there's a Western Development Commission. Its remit is strictly the 7 counties that stops at Clare. The Connected Hubs is a national thing that comes through the Department of Rural and Community Development and Gaeltacht.
When they're set up.
Yeah. But there have been funding programs from the Department of Rural and Community Development for things like EV chargers, things like that. But it's very possibly something that could be done. Like if Connected Hubs became some sort of a festival hub, there could be funding sought for that then as well. And that would be nationwide. That would not be coming. We would just be the conduit. You know.
So Liam, if the Connected Hubs in any given place were to start collaborating with festivals in any given place and come together and devise plans, there could be a new source of funding?
Yeah, I think that there are always funding programs open up in response to various demands. You know,
issues,
I think but I also think that, I think I said earlier on about being predictable and being unpredictable. The likes of a Kerry County Council, if they have some arts funding, it's very clearly defined for Kerry. That's why you can tap into Kerry now. I think there's still no problem with some hub or some festival on the periphery of Kerry, on the border areas, being involved in that, even if their audience comes from Cork as well too. You know, so.
Okay.
Could I just add? I just wanted to ask Craig, how are you I'm Maura Lowe from Listowel. So I just wanted to ask Craig, how are you currently funded? Your collective, obviously, you have.
Well, the collective itself, I'm being compensated through Sligo bid. The collective itself doesn't have any funding at the moment. So my job at the moment is to, get the constitution through, get the bank account, put all the things in place to create the legal entity that becomes, and also get buy-in from all the town-based festivals. The plan is then to, once I've finished my role after about 9 months, is to then hand my role off to volunteers from the local festivals. The money coming in will be through grant applications, through Leader, primarily, probably. So the festival, I mean, the collective itself doesn't have any money. Yeah. I'm paid to set it up, and at some point we'll buy in or we'll apply for funding for things like shared resources or whatever it is. So, but it'll be led and managed on a volunteer basis by the people who will be benefiting from it.
And we've got one down here, and this, I'm afraid, will be the last question, I think. Thank you. If you just introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Anya McCabe with Fela and Fubble in Belfast. And just want to echo what Roisin said in terms of, you know, wanting to see more collaboration cross-border, all-island, and not just at border counties and that. I remember being at a Peace Plus thing recently and saying, you know, we definitely need more collaboration than just the north and the border counties, you know. 2 things that Emily said. One is, from Fela's perspective, we have collaborated with Cork for quite a number of years, a lifelong learning thing, and go do it yourself is what you said, and we do. And that's grand for those of us that are big enough to do it. But I do think the idea of collaboration, collectives, regional hubs, and thankfully, as Carl sitting here, as Roisin said, came and spoke to our own festivals forum, it was great. One thing, Emily, you did say, and around inexperienced decision makers and that, and I think, and beholden to local politics. That said, you know, Fela are beholden to our local community, because if we were to do anything outside of, you know, and I think you need to be very mindful, because they will soon tell you if you're going in the wrong direction. And in terms of our talks, I mean, we have 92 talks as part of our August programme of 750 events, but the talks, they're free and they're not on Eventbrite, and all so that local people can come and have their say and have their opinions, and they're as valid as everybody else. And, you know, I'll finish with one thing. Probably about 15 years ago, there was a bit of drift in direction, and it was our local people who were doing this for brought us back. And, you know, so that's important.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I see more hands, but Carl is here giving me the evil eye. Carl, can I take one more, Carl?
If we can finish in 2 minutes.
Okay, 30 seconds. You've been a fantastic audience. Oh, one over here.
And this guy's had his hand up for like 10
sorry.
minutes.
I'm so sorry. The okay.
It's so exciting to see so many authorities and so many NGOs, so many policymakers in the room. To connect, we need to meet in person. So the cooperation with Northern Ireland Fund that just closed, it was prohibitive to put in anything for accommodation or travel, or fuel, or food. So any artist in Mayo who want to collaborate with artists in Northern Ireland,
okay.
do it by Zoom. Those tiny little things, maybe €200, €300 into those grant funds, could make such a massive.
Thank you very much. That's a very good, clear point. Go. 30 seconds.
We talk about friction, accessibility, and all this, and the biggest thing for small festivals is funding, and most people here are volunteers. And my thing is, we were in a workshop at the council last year, and in that room, everyone said the application process, the time, all of this that goes towards it. Why is it such a horrible, laborious task? Especially with the Arts Council, there's a person in an organisation in Sligo who has to put it out of office on their email saying, I'm knee deep in an arts application. And then if you read Morgan Grant, the chair of the Arts Council, said about bursaries, the bursary awards about giving artists the most precious thing that they need, time. Time to think, time to create, time to experiment, time to develop. But yet, that person that puts it out of office, people that came to that conference all say, you're using all the rest of our time unnecessarily.
I know. Thank you. Thank you.
How excellent to see the
30 seconds.
30 seconds. You got it.
And then that's it.
You got it. And a comment, not a question.
Okay.
It's excellent. See the buzz in the room and everyone come back. I'm Azita Siri. I am from Fulch, Ireland. And I just wanted to say this, what an excellent session. Wonderful contributions from each of the panels. with very expertly facilitated by yourself, Bernadette. I have to say all the contributions combined with some of the questions that have been posed today have given me a very rich takeaway list with respect to considerations and things for planning. One of the elements, a clash calendar, I think, was commented on. Eddie's correct. There is a digital facility. Eddie, you didn't even know I was sitting behind you, did you? But he's right. There is a digital portal with respect to accessing Discover Ireland, which is a national platform for promoting yourself. The information and the content is only as good as the contributions that are put in. But certainly a takeaway for us, we have internal, what we call clash calendars that are shared with Tourism Ireland and our respective marketing teams.
Okay, fantastic.
I think we're going to take it away to allow it to become a tool for festivals nationally.
Thank you, Azita. Thank you very much. Thanks a million. Okay, no.
To you, because this the discussion could go on, and hopefully it will go on outside in your break. Which is 15 minutes, so we start at 11:45. Just to say, Bernadette, thank you so much for being for steering us so expertly.
No problem. Pleasure.
And thank you to the panel. So thank you to Liam,
Brilliant
Emily, Craig, Roisin, and Emma. So thanks so
super.
much for your time.
Super. I really enjoyed that. It was really good. Lovely. Good job.
I just I have one piece of housekeeping, which is if anybody owns a black Seat Leon, registration 182D9665. If you recognise that, can you please move your car because it's blocking access? So thanks very much, and see you at 11:45. Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Bernadette.
That was
Thank you.
great. Really
No.
good. It was a good chat.
That was great.
Did you want to water?
Yeah, grab your grand. I got it. Yeah.
So sorry.
Misha, you're up. That's enough. Yeah. So what's next for you then?
The next thing is Minefield at Electric Picnic. That's end of August. But I'm working on a few feasibility studies at the moment, which are kind of
bread and butter kind of stuff.
Taking up a bit of time. Not particularly exciting or sexy, but it's good, like they're good to do. You know?
Depends on the client, I guess, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What other clients can you say?
So one of them's a nice one actually. It's and may impinge on Waterford to some extent. So it's a Three Rivers festival based on the Barrow and Shore. So it's a feasibility study for Leader in Kilkenny.
Oh, interesting.
To do a festival at some point. Needless to say, I'm going to say it is feasible.
Yeah.
And this is the way
it's what they're paying you for.
This is the way it should be done.
Yeah. Good to hear something still coming out of Three Rivers.
We did. Were you involved at all on the Three Sisters capital of culture?
I wasn't, but I was.
Her Majesty.
I became involved after the fact because I was working with.
Hello, everybody. Thanks very much. We're going to move on to our second session.
Four Rivers that kind of came directly.
And this is a 90-minute session as well. I would just like to introduce Professor Jane Ali-Knight from Edinburgh Napier University, who's very kindly agreed to chair this session for us on sustainability, adaptability and social architecture. So just to clarify, this is business sustainability as opposed to environmental sustainability, although we may touch on that. But just to thank you and to thank the panellists, thanks for coming. Some of you have travelled a long way to be here, so we really appreciate that. And we hope you have a very rich discussion. I'll hand over to Jane. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carl, and thank you to the Arts Council for inviting me back to Sligo. It's actually my second visit here in a year, so I'm an advocate for the region. So in the next 90 minutes then, we're going to explore with our panellists, who I'll introduce later, how we're responding to the festival FLUX that we heard Shona discuss yesterday, and how we're doing that in innovative and creative ways to secure the sustainability of festivals and cultural organisations going forward. So in recent months, we've seen various industry responses to the current festival ecosystem and challenges. One such example in April was when founders of the UK's Shambhala Festival transferred ownership of the company to its employees, making it the first ever worker-owned festival in the UK. So rather than selling off to venture capitalists or promotion companies such as Live Nation, they defended the festival's independence, and this has really acted as a blueprint for ethical stewardship, sustainability and fairer business models going forward. Other examples include festivals like C2C, where the festival director said recently, festivals are living organisms and they need to remain loyal to their communities. Audiences, artists, local scenes and the ecosystems around them. In a time of increased festivalisation and digitalisation, festivals need to bring in the personal connections that we need ever more in our lives. So I think that's a really interesting quote for us to think about. And then finally, I just want to refer to some research that we did during COVID with Edinburgh's festivals. So we looked at the festival's response to COVID and how they'd adapted and changed their business models. We came up with a model called, because we're academics, so we love to have these models. So we came up with a model which was around 3 areas of respond, reimagine and resilience, and looking at how that impacts on the festival life cycle. And then someone that you're all very familiar with, Fergus Linehan, who was actually the director of the Edinburgh International Festival at the time, said as part of that research that the old approach of looking at festivals is no longer sustainable. and that in terms of the real value of the arts, festivals need to work together to innovate, adapt and invest in change. And I think throughout the last few days, we've heard discussions of the importance of things like partnership, flexibility, adaptability, diversity of funding streams, and reimagining of the festival space, different staffing models and relocation of resources. So hopefully these are areas that our panellists are going to be exploring in the next 90 minutes. So in terms of how it's going to work logistically, each panellist is going to speak for sort of 5 to 15 minutes. Some of them have got a few slides they're going to present as well, but it's certainly not death by PowerPoint. Then after that, we will have time for lots of questions. So please do get your thinking caps on and try and be as provocative as possible to our panellists. So we've got Gawain, Hazel, John and Nusha, who are going to be speaking. And they're really representing the length and breadth of Irish festivals and also going across the water into Scotland as well. And what I found when actually speaking with them before today was there's a surprising commonality between all of the festivals. And so this is, again, what we're going to explore. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first panellist, to Gawain, who will introduce himself and also talk about the work that he's doing in the festival space. So, over to you, Gawain. Thank you.
Are we doing it just from the seats? Are we all right doing that?
You can do it wherever you want.
Professionally lounge. So thanks very much for having me. Thanks very much. Looking forward to this conversation. So my name is Gawain Morrison. I am a creative producer, artist, and musician over the last 30 years. And we started Brink about 4 years ago, and it was really in looking at the state of the city in terms of dereliction and looking at the way we are currently living through many different crises, hence Brink. And the purpose of it was actually when you're at the brink of a climate crisis or other crisis, this is actually the point where we can find each other, come together and make a change. I started really, it was a sort of post-COVID comeback gig. I finished Culture Night until they picked it back up again 3 years later, Adam and the folks up the back there. But I was commissioned to do this piece called the Almgrove as part of Culture Night. And it was Ireland's largest sustainable, monumental piece of audiovisual installation. And the purpose of it was to be the smallest possible waste footprint as possible and to be something that could inspire and talk to what should the city be after COVID, what can it be, what can we change, and that it was in the heart of the city centre, in the cultural quarter, in an area of great dereliction when it shouldn't be. It's orchestrated dereliction. And so the question was very much, what should this city do? What can any city do? What should all cities be doing to be able to deal with the change, come together to make that change? So myself and Paul were actually actively looking around the derelict area of the cultural centre of our city. This is at the end of Royal Avenue. And it's a derelict space, has been derelict for a long time, and Belfast City Council have bought it to become a £100 million heritage building called Belfast Stories. And in the meanwhile, duration of this project, whilst it's going through its various stages of planning, we pitched for and got access to this site. And it wasn't an easy journey, but I'll not go down that right now. And we got this space, and it's kind of like the dog chasing the car. What do you do once you've got it? And we wanted to make sure that we lived by our ethos of sustainable practice, sustainable business, and to build a space for the city that the city could use, the citizens of our city. This is our common space. This is council-owned. That means it's ours. And it wasn't okay that it was left to dereliction. And so what we wanted to do was invite in other organisations, other groups, and also be respectful of the space and what has been there and what has lived there before we arrived. So actually what you can see on the walls here are some of the murals that Adam's Festival Hit the North does and uses around this, and we wanted to be respectful to it. So we took, there was another project beside us that took down all the hoardings, and we were like, you can't just take down that, that's our cultural heritage of that space. So we took all those boards and then we made artefacts from them. We then actually sourced as many materials, we went out in the hustle and got as much as we could for free. And there's a phenomenal amount of stuff you can get for free if you go hustling for it. And it's in good nick. So we got baths as planters, we got the containers, we got all the windows and doors for free, and we made them into our workshop spaces. We turned it into a growing space. And in 1 year, the amount of life that it brought in terms of nature and biodiversity to the space was extraordinary. And it was a beautiful park in the heart of a derelict space, in an area of dereliction, and it brought life to what was possible. What can you do with these spaces? Why should you leave them to dereliction? And we were off-grid. We put up big canopies that we had, not just as a growing space for community growing, but also as a space, a venue, an outdoor site, a space for the citizens of Belfast. And we opened the gates as soon as we got them. And we invited people to just wander in as we were trying to build and paint and make. And we listened to the conversations and memories of people that had walked past this space and go, oh, I remember, there was a shop across the way from there. When I went to primary school, we bought our school bags from there. Or my granddad used to live in this. It wasn't Kent Street, it was actually Mustard Street because there was a mustard factory. And all of a sudden, you were getting all these place-based layers of society that were part of this space. And it made it so important. And we had everybody from Hit the North that were embedded and had been there, working with us and having this space come alive. Pride used it as the family area. Outburst Festival used it for their markets. The Syrian groups that we had as part of our community groups that were coming in used it as a barbecue space, and they brought life to it. It became a recognised space for people to use and be part of. So this is Hit the North, a fantastic life bringer to the area, and it was so important to us to be part of it as well. So Adam threw us a cherry picker so that we could put this up on the wall and make sure that our mantra, our call out, what should this city do, was painted up on the side of the library looking over the site. And it's still there, and it still calls out to what should we do as a city. And these were the artifacts that then Paul, very lovingly and with a lot of graft, made these beautiful pieces of art from the art that had gone up, and then they could be converted into tables, and we used them for our workshops. So it was about recognising the space and the place and bringing those artifacts into what could we do. And because we were very much about trying to make as much noise and invite as many people in to have the conversation about the city, we hosted a quarterly festival and conference on the solstices and the equinoxes. And if you wanted to pay attention to the fact that the thing that spins around us on these times actually gives us our life, brilliant. If you don't care and you're just coming down for a hoolie or a bit of chat, that's also okay. And it was not to be preachy, but it gave everybody the rabbit hole to wander down to find their own journey into what it would mean. And so we had supper clubs, we had gigs, we had all manner of conferences. We had really, because it was a fest, and I love festivals, because they break reality. It puts you into, okay, this is a different way to look at the world. And so by creating this space and inviting people in, it meant that you could put an activist on the stage with a politician. You could put a business leader on stage with somebody who is a cultural leader. And they could all have an honest conversation about what did you think about what we should be doing with our food, with our waste, with our transportation, our energy, our people, our living, our architecture. And so we had everybody from the Royal Society of Ulster Architects to Northern Ireland Electric. We had different politicians that were coming on stage to be part of it. And because there was a common purpose. It was about we were all citizens together of this city and what should we do for our city. And that lady on the right-hand side, don't know if you recognise her, Bernadette McAliskey, an extraordinary woman, human rights activist for years, walked across Parliament and slapped a politician in the face after Bloody Sunday for being so rude as to think that they were just those Irish. She was extraordinary. Now she fights for Lough Neagh and the pollution that humans are creating in this and the death of Lough Neagh. We also wanted to make sure that we were recognising that it was a space for creativity. recognising the creativity that was already on the walls, and that was part of that whole cultural quarter. And so we commissioned art for our festivals and our conferences. We made sure that it was a platform for other ways for people to perform. There's theatre performance, there was music, there was poetry, there was all manner of people bringing their creative souls and aspirations to it. And going back to my old, when I used to run club nights days, I was pulling in all my mates that were part of the clubbing. I just put out the call to anybody and everybody and says, get you in here. And so we had BBC broadcasting live for the summer solstices to make sure that we were reaching as many people as possible with this whole thought process, the reason for it to exist. And the beauty of the space was then created by the people that came in and used it. Nature then took over and was part of our space together. And without the relationships and the friendships of the other festival, like the Gillian and the Northern Ireland Science Festival, where we couldn't have done these without them. They came in and helped us from a festival management point of view. Hit the North, being part of what we were doing was bringing eyeballs and volume to the place. And it was a recognition that collaboration and community is actually the only way we succeed in moving forward in a time of precarity. And everything's precarious. Business models are precarious. Food's precarious. Getting from A to B is precarious. And so it's a recognition of that, but it's not to dwell in it. It's to be, we can do this together and make a difference. We're at the brink. Come together, do something together. And so this was it in the final couple of days. It was a meanwhile project. It was 18 months. We had 2 9-month licenses back to back. And then we had to leave because then they were going on into the next phase of planning on the site where they had to gouge the whole thing up. And we had worked very, very hard, but it was very much sort of a transient moment. You got to let it go. We didn't really let it go too hard. We grieved for a while, let's be honest with you. But you have to let it go. And then that was it when we left and moved all the stuff. And it looks like that now, but with a big pile of stones just in front of in the middle of the shot now. But it's important to recognise that that wasn't the end, and that we didn't necessarily think that we were going to continue on a quarterly or an annual festival basis, but we will do more festival work, more conference work. But it was recognising that actually what we built together was then we could start to work and doing things with other festivals. So we've been doing events with Northern Ireland Science Festival as Brink, with the Imagine Festival as Brink, going out and going about the islands and going and doing things as Brink, and looking at what was the ethos and the core of what we were doing, and then bringing that forward. And at some point, we'll do another festival, and we'll do another conference. But that's not the core of sustainability. It's the adaptability and resilience.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Gwen. I think just a brilliant example then of that sort of regenerating and respecting city space, which actually is a great segue into our next speaker. So I'd like to introduce Hazel. So I know Hazel very well, as we're both from Edinburgh, and I sit on the board of an organisation called Hidden Door. And Hazel, amongst this is not her day job. This is her outside day job. She's actually the festival director. So I'm going to pass over to Hazel.
Hello, folks. Thanks so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And what an inspirational story to follow. I'm absolutely quaking, but I love the idea that the idea of Brink transcends a space, a specific space. That's wonderful. It's got a life beyond the building. For those of you that don't know Hidden Door, which I suspect is many of you, we are an arts festival in Edinburgh. We're not one of the August festivals. You'll all know about those, I'm sure, but we are a festival that takes place out with August, and that is deliberately so. Going to sort of go back in time a wee bit. So in 2010, a bunch of artists got together to try and make something for the city themselves with their hands as an artist sort of community. And that idea of bringing art forms into one space, into one venue, and hosting visual art and spoken word and dance and theatre and music all together in one space, created by the creative community for people in Edinburgh, that took root. And that then grew into what became our first full festival in 2014. So since 2014, Hidden Door, a volunteer-led arts charity run by volunteers for the love of it, has been putting on a multi-arts festival on a pretty much annual basis in unused or stalled spaces across the city. So these are spaces that are derelict or about to be developed or in that sort of stalled state, we sniff around, we dig them up, we speak to the developers, the council, portfolio owners for estates or building managers and get permission to take these spaces on for an extended, it's temporary meanwhile use, but it is sometimes over a longer period of time, and I'll run through some of the venues in just a sec. But the idea is to both literally and figuratively open up space for the arts in the city. And we're deliberately transient as well in that the spaces we use aren't just in one part of Edinburgh, they are across the city. And that allows us to take arts and culture to sometimes more typically underserved parts of the city. So we've had a number of venues over the years. Our first one was 24 arched vaults down in near the train station in Edinburgh, and they'd been left by the council full of junk, filing cabinets full of all sorts of confidential material, which fortunately had welded together from the damp, so we couldn't read any of it, but maps of the site. One of the arches was just full of bicycles that I think you'd find a broken bike on the street that got shoved in this arch, so we used that to create artwork with. That worked. We managed to tap into this energy, and after doing the first one in 2014, we didn't really know what we were doing. It was a leap of faith, but it grew into something that then had a bit more structure. But the idea very much was to make something ourselves, grassroots energy. What can we do in the city? Completely naive, completely idiotic. And then we went, okay, there's something here. The second year we did it, we got a bit better at it. The third year we did it, we got better again. And so I'm pleased to say that we're 2 weeks away from our festival this year, and I'm hoping we're going to get better again. So 2015, we went to a space called King Stables Road, and that's the large image with the office buildings in the background that you can see. And this was in the very city centre, surrounded by tenement flats, homes, and as you touched on, people have memories of these spaces. We might discover them and take them on for creative arts festival use, but they're not ours. They belong to people, and that's an idea that we explore with Hidden Door. Who are these spaces for? Who are these empty urban spaces for? And when they're developed, who are they then for again? So we invite the community in to tell us their stories, and that's a really important part. We don't helicopter in and do something at the community. It is the community that makes these festivals with us, and that is absolutely enshrined in our approach to the spaces we use. But it also means that quite often we're going into spaces where people's bedrooms look into the backyard, or we put a stage outside their window. So as you can imagine, there's an awful lot of communication and goodwill that we build to make these amazing events happen. One of the things that we try to do when we possibly can is legacy work. So whilst, as I've already said, many of the spaces are pre-development and we get in that sort of limbo period, some of them are just sitting there waiting to be woken up again. And the Leith Theatre, which is a derelict theatre building you can see on the slide here, was one of those. It had been empty and sitting, stored full of absolute nonsense. Bits of old organ, money for old rope. The entire stage just had a big pile of rope on it, which I think we did actually sell. And so it had been empty for 30 years, and we got all our volunteers in over a period of 2 months to clean pigeon poo off 400 chairs, which had just been sitting there mouldering. We did repairs to the roof, which had been a hard hat area up until that point, to allow our volunteers to get inside and actually then start making good the space to then transform it into an arts venue. And that meant that the Leith Theatre Trust, who had the space gifted to them by the council or given over to them by the council, were able to build on that because we'd got people across the threshold, and that's something that I'm sure has been covered in many of the sessions. Get people into a space, then they fall in love with it. Get people working on a space in a building, then they understand that they actually have agency, and then they fall in love with it as well. And that's one of the reasons that Hidden Door has managed to exist, I think, over the number of years that we've been doing this madness. So we transformed this giant theatre, all of the nooks and crannies, into various different art spaces. And I've not put too many slides on here of different parts of the festival because I was told 5 slides. So
I know.
I've actually got 6.
I
was looking at yours, being very envious. But honestly, death by slides, I could go on forever. But we've also taken on other spaces that have other uses and meanings to communities. So the cinema building that you see there was actually used by the Kingdom Church, who stayed in the space whilst we turned it into one of our venues, and we used the downstairs and the basement around. They came and got involved. In fact, I was sitting outside the space one day getting ready to go in, and I was wearing my scruffy clothes because I was about to do more pigeon poo moving. Seems to be a bit of a feature of the work that we do. I was looking a bit scruffy, and some of the church came out and actually asked me if I was okay and if I needed a cup of tea. I think they thought I was homeless. And this is the beauty of Hidden Door. I think everybody just mucks in, and I'm very much one of the team that does that as well. It's a bit of a privilege, really, to have been able to poke around in so many different buildings, but it's also one that we recognise as a privilege, in that I don't think I've ever gone into a space where somebody hasn't already had an association with it. So the church that was in there were very welcoming, a bit bemused about what it was we were trying to do, but glad to see that the building was on the map. And this has since been developed into flats, and that was on the cards. It was the developer that let us use it. The big hexagonal building on the top there is a vast office complex in Edinburgh, former Scottish Widows insurance building. And it was, I think, the largest single office floor plate in the UK, if that's of interest. I mean, it's big. And that was another challenge in how do you take a building that's actually, architecturally quite stunning, the building envelope, absolutely amazing, but very few people see it from that angle. Turn that into something that people connect with. As it turns out, the thousands upon thousands of people that had worked there had all connected with it and wanted to come and see it full of art. Most of them just wanted to see where their desk was, what we'd done with that. But it was unrecognisable, and I think that was the subverting expectations of what you can do with these spaces is a really big part of that, because it brings the interest. And the whole point in Hidden Door, as I've said, is to open up space, but it's to showcase early career and emerging artists alongside those that are more established in their careers, and to elevate the programme altogether. But also, some folk will come to see just the building, and then from coming into the building, they will discover visual art, they will discover music. Some people might come to see the visual art specifically. Then they'll come and find some spoken word that they didn't know, and that's how this organically then builds and builds and builds into this community. The Hidden Door community isn't just the artists or the volunteers or the production crew or the people that come. It's a little bit of everything, because there's so many blurred lines within that. People might volunteer one year and then put in a proposal to exhibit the next, or they might perform in a band one year and actually come and put high-vis vest on the next year because they enjoyed it so much. At least that's what they tell me. The large neoclassical building there on the bottom, the colourful one, doesn't look like that in real life, we added the colour, is one of the examples of a not-for-you building, I think. And this is, again, people's relationship to Edinburgh is very much dictated by the sort of the sense of place. And what do you think when you think Edinburgh? Sort of medieval spires, Gothic buildings, neoclassical architecture, Scots baronial, cobbled streets. It's all of those things, but it's also, homes, places of work, where people play and live. But buildings like this, the former Royal High School, you walk past it and it's got this sort of grandeur, this sort of facade of it's not for you. And in its 150-year history, it had never been opened up to the public in its entirety. So we invited people in to play, and we had some former students with the school, closest to school in 1960, come along and tell us their stories. It's about the storytelling that you mentioned as well, bring people in, which we record, and we then turn into sort of the legacy of the building as well. That building, actually, I'm delighted to say, is now being turned into the National Centre for Music. So it's one of the spaces, such as the Lee Theatre, where we've actually been able to put our work towards a viable cultural use for a space. And as I mentioned, so all the different art forms, dance, music, theatre, spoken word, all the visual art is curated in situ. We lean into the storytelling. Our site at the moment, and I'm going to show you a teaser trailer for this festival, which is in 2 weeks' time. I'm not getting much sleep at the moment. So anybody that runs festivals knows what 2 weeks before the festival feels like. But the artists are invited into the spaces. They're selected either via open call, or they're selected through being sort of commissioned to make work as a mixture of both. And that's across all the art forms. They come to site, they see the space, they then respond to the space and either bring work that they have that responds, or they will make something in situ, and that's really important. The Paper Factory is where we are at the moment. It's a 15.5-acre former cardboard box and paper manufacturing facility, which does not roll off the tongue, hence the Paper Factory. And that's going to be developed into flats very soon. We were given the site in 2024, and this will be our second full festival there. And so we're calling it the last shift. We're giving it a last hurrah. And the stewards are going to be workers at the factory. We're telling the story. We are bringing parts of the workers' experiences of working there to life in their testimonials and their stories, which will be recorded and projected. Dance and performance from previous festival that we commissioned is being adapted to continue to tell that story. We've shifted it around a bit in that we're using spaces slightly differently. Again, I mentioned subverting expectations. No two Hidden Door festivals are alike. And one of the most beautiful things for me is when people come into a space that they've never been into before, no one knows how to behave. And they all walk in, what do I do here? And it's glorious. So we're hoping to recreate that wonder and magic with a fully immersive experience. And as I've said, this is run by volunteers year round, myself included. We do receive Creative Scotland funding. It's very, very gratefully received, but it does not cover, by a long stretch, everything that it takes to put on a festival at scale. So most of our income is through ticket sales and bar revenue, and relies on people buying tickets. We were talking about sustainability. I'm sure we'll touch on this aspect of that as well. But the fact that we can put something together with volunteers who are doing this for the love of it, through passion, and who bring their very, very, high level of experience from their careers, potentially. Our finance manager is a finance manager, our comms lead is a comms lead. We couldn't afford to do this if we had to pay everybody. Now, that is a question. How do you then take that and turn that into something that has legs? And we've been doing this for 15 years nearly. It works. But we're trying to look at the festival as something that the city needs and that can't just be person-led. So that's a process we're going through at the moment. Just received multi-year funding from Creative Scotland, so it's very exciting, sort of a threshold time for us. So what I'm going to try and do now is stop talking, because I think pretty much ran over my time, I do apologise, is play you a teaser. Oh, is it going to play?
Yeah.
Ooh. And that's how we think we'll get people to come.
Thank you so much, Hazel. And I think lots of synergies already between, the two presentations. So now we're going to move on to John, which is a slightly different sort of business model and a slightly different festival.
Lovely. Thanks, Jane. Here we go. Thanks, guys. That was great. And I can certainly see those commonalities emerging between what we do. So thanks, everyone, for being here. My name is John O'Connell. I am the Executive Director of the Wolds Project and the Festival Director of Waterford Wolds Festival. Waterford Wolds it's probably what our company is best known for. It's a street art festival, and it takes place in... Sorry, I should skip ahead a slide. It takes place in Waterford every August. And while it's what we're best known for, I think probably what most people don't realise is that it only makes up about 25% of what the organisation actually does every year. So the Wolds Project is a social enterprise, and that's kind of what I've come here to talk a little bit about today, that social enterprise model. And it's a social enterprise that has evolved over time from that festival into a commissioning agency and a consultancy company and a public engagement organisation, and we work throughout the country. There's basically nowhere on the island that the work hasn't taken us at this stage. And what I really want to talk about today is how that evolution happened and how what started out as that grassroots festival on the streets gradually became something much bigger and something more sustainable than that annual event that pops up once a year and then disappears again, and people wait for it to come back. Next one. So for me, an interesting thing about it is that the organisation didn't create the festival created the organisation. As I said, it began organically as a grassroots street art festival. And at the beginning, it came about as a response to the recession and an answer to the dereliction that was happening in the city, and it was a way about bringing artists into those underserviced areas of the city and creating that energy and introducing that street art culture to Waterford. And what we discovered once we'd started is that quite quickly there was a demand that came to us beyond the festival itself for people who wanted us to do work and who wanted us to create murals and do workshops and do tours, and were bringing us their ideas straight away. And we were hearing from businesses, and we were hearing from local authorities in other parts of the country and festivals in other parts of the country, and from community groups and just various organisations who were looking for us to make murals and work for them. And it didn't take long to realise that the festival itself, taking place in 10 days and happening once a year, couldn't answer all of that work, and would have to turn those people away. And that was something that we wanted to follow that work and see what would happen. So about 5 years after the festival had started, the Walls project was formed as a CLG and evolved quite quickly from that point. I mean, I suppose probably within a year of being founded as a CLG, it was a year-round organisation and was fully staffed. So an interesting thing for me about how the festival and the organisation itself relate to each other, I often think about it, and I think it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. So the festival, as I said, is what we're best known for, and it's our public-facing platform. So like when I meet people and they say to me, where do you work? I nearly always say Waterford Wolds rather than the Wolds Project, even though the Wolds Project is the more accurate answer. That's the name of the company, but Waterford Wolds is what I'm known for, and that's the one that gets the reaction. People go, oh, Waterford Wolds, we love what you do. Well, I hope they say that. So it gives us that visibility, and it's built our reputation, and it brings us opportunities, and we build relationships through it. But that organisation that's what allows the work to happen year round. So obviously the festival is just that 10 days in August. So what we say is that the festival is the shop window for the organisation, and it's like our marketing budget. And then the organisation in turn supports the festival and allows it to be sustainable, and allows it to happen, and allows it to be staffed. And that's a structure that just evolved out of necessity. There was never a moment when everyone sat down and said, right, we need to become a CLG, and this is going to be our strategic plan. It was just something much more organic and more gradual than that. So we realised that if we wanted to sustain that work and keep it going, and crucially to provide regular opportunities for artists, so again, it's not just that once a year, and if we wanted to retain staff who were competent and dedicated and didn't have to work other jobs to be able to do this, that we needed to have the year-round activity and the year-round impacts as well. I mean, the impacts of what we do are obviously at the core of what we do, and to be able to do those year-round is very important to us as well. So therefore, we needed that year-round organisation and year-round income, obviously. So going back, I suppose, to that kind of symbiotic relationship, I think of it as like the festival operates as a system within a system. So it's nearly like a separate company, but at the same time it's not. So it has its own budget. So every year we do the festival for about €120,000, which is it's a very lean budget for the amount of work we do. We're talking about a 10-day festival, 50 artists, cherry pickers all over the city. It's a lot for that money. We think we give good value. So in a typical year of the festival, that money comes from about 40 different sources. So that's a mix of money, and some of that support comes from the Arts Council and the local authority in project funding, and that's hugely important to us, of course. And each of those relationships is worth more than just money. There are other benefits that come from the partnerships with those kind of organisations. And then beyond that, the remaining budget is made up from just a huge mix of sponsors, and we work with international embassies and local businesses and people who own walls and just all kinds of partners, and then a certain amount of earned income from the festival as well. And because the organisation itself doesn't have any core funding, it's run like a business, and it's commercial. So there's a constant pressure there to keep the work going and to keep the money coming in, and to sustain that cash flow, and obviously to maintain employment. That we're a staff of 3, and everyone has lives and families and mortgages and all that need to be paid. So that's all very important. So what I often say to people is, like, I work for a CLG and a non-profit, and there's a board of directors, but it feels very much like it did when I was self-employed that you have that pressure on you every month to keep the money coming in and to make the payroll, and the buck really stops here. So another thing we learned about that diversification is that the diversification itself needs to be diversified. So an example of that, how that worked, is that we found at one stage the work kind of drifted very much into commissioned artwork, and we started working with a couple of big corporate clients and developers, and I mean, it seemed like fantastic work. They had huge budgets and they had these amazing big walls, and they were multi-mural projects, and like tons of artistic freedom as well, which is good and which is rare. So we were like, great, this seems really good, and we moved quite comfortably into that space. And then what we found is a couple of those contracts got pulled very quickly, and at the same time, with no real recourse for us, and we found ourselves in a very precarious position where we were essentially cashless, and our plan for the months ahead was gone, and we didn't really have any way of making payroll the next month, and we found we had to adapt very quickly, and thankfully we were able to, and thankfully we were successful in that, and we're still here. But it was a lesson in how fragile the model can be when you're operating as a business like that, I suppose, like any business really. So we discovered you don't rely on too much on one thing, and you don't put all your eggs in one basket. So since then, we've really consciously tried to build a broader ecosystem around us, make partnerships in various different sectors. So we're not relying on that kind of private developer money. It's about some public money, some private community sectors. And something interesting that's come out of that is that some of the relationships we've built, we've discovered they're really unexpected ones that you would never really think of unless you had to. Did I go ahead? Oh, sorry, there we go. Yeah. So a good example of that would be a partnership we've developed with an accounting firm in Waterford. Try a little name check for Fitzgerald Power there, our good friends. So I think on paper that would seem like a really unlikely fit, the corporate world of an accountancy firm and the edgy world of street art. But somehow it's not, and somehow it really works. They came to us initially as just to sponsor one wall as part of the festival. They wanted their premises painted, and we discovered that they really had a love for what we do and an understanding of what we do, and they believed in it, and they understand what street art does for the city. And it just became part of what they do, and they even got involved at the creative level, sometimes not in any kind of a sponsor overstepping, terrible sort of way, but just, sometimes they would come to us and say, hey, maybe we could do this, and, sometimes they were actually good ideas, so we went with them. So what began as that one-off sponsorship gradually became a real genuine partnership. And I think that's something really interesting about the way that we operate. Because we've had to build those relationships outside of traditional art structures and funding structures. We've had to be very light on our feet and very kind of outward facing and collaborative and responsive, and sometimes you just discover these little treasures that you might never have otherwise come across if you had the comfort of being funded, I suppose. Skip ahead, there we go. So coming to the end, I suppose something I'd say about the whole social enterprise model, which was what we were asked to talk about here today, is that it's started for us out of necessity, but over time it allowed the organisation to become something much more meaningful than a festival that pops up once a year and then disappears again. And because we have that year-round structure now, we have created ongoing employment. So there's 3 of us who are working full-time there. We can give year-round opportunities for artists to encourage them to build their own careers. We've been able to deepen those partnerships that happen around us and build our relationships with the community around us as well. And then obviously, very crucially, we've been able to vastly expand the artistic ambition of the work, so that the stuff happens year-round and in other settings and around the country and in bigger ways. And I mean, that's a very beneficial part of the model. So it's the impact is cumulative rather than just that temporary impact, and that's a very interesting part of it for me. So it's not just about the financial sustainability for what we do, which is obviously very, very important, but the idea that those sustainable organisation structures can allow the work to become deeper and more ambitious and more enriching and embedded in people's daily lives. And that's very much what we're about, as well as about embedding the work in people's daily lives and bringing the work to them and to where they live and work and commute. So we never set out to become a social enterprise. We became a social enterprise to keep the festival going. But in that process, it evolved into something much bigger and with much more meaning than had ever originally been imagined. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Another inspirational insight, I think, into a different type of festival model and structure. And then we're now going to go to our final speaker today. So, Nisha, I'll hand over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks, everybody. Thanks for having us here. I don't know if we've got a slide. Yeah, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my kind of my career in festivals. It's kind of a slightly different approach to all of your gorgeous inspirational projects, but just to kind of give you a sense of how you can make a living and not make a living out of being a festival maker and working on festivals. First of all, there's a kind of an interesting distinction, which a lot of people, you'll all have this kind of frustration of talking to people about saying, what do you do? I make festivals or I work on festivals. And most people have a notion that you're basically an event organizer or that you're an event manager. And obviously it's you all know it's an awful lot more than that. There's always some kind of a creative, artistic impetus behind it. And there's always a why behind it. And this is the thing I'm going to talk about today. So as before the festival is the question, why? Why are you going to do it? What is the need for this to exist? What's the imperative? So I'll just give you a little bit of background on me. Myself and my wife, Maria Schwepp, run a company called Schwepp Curtis Nunn, and we produce and create festivals and events. And we've just about, over the past 10 years, managed to carve a living out of it for both of us, just the two of us, with other colleagues like Tom Lawler and others who we've worked with on various projects. But I started in this crazy world 30 years ago next weekend on the Cat Laughs Comedy Festival. And that's a really interesting kind of initial why, because Cat Laughs Comedy Festival was actually set up as a project of a theatre company called Bickerstaff Theatre Company in Kilkenny. And they produced plays, and they produced plays for what they said was an audience whose most of whose artistic experience or cultural experience was television. So they made theatre that really appealed to people who mainly watch television. So they were always looking to create new audiences. And they'd been to the Edinburgh Festival, and they decided, met an American guy called Michael McCarthy, now sadly no longer with us, who's with a really interesting comedy troupe called Second City in Chicago. And he had worked with Bill Murray and George Wendt and lots of other people, and they brought all these people to Kilkenny, including Bill Murray, the actor, in 1996, 30 years ago, and Kilkenny did not know what had hit it. And it was an extraordinary thing. And the notion of comedy festivals was actually pretty novel at the time. It's hard to imagine that now. But at the time, internationally, there was Edinburgh, there was Melbourne, there was Just for Laughs in Montreal. I mean, that was it for comedy festivals. And then this upstart in Kilkenny. And it completely put Kilkenny on the map. It was extraordinary. But the why at the beginning of it was the interesting thing. It was a theatre company that made a festival. Now, the festival kind of went on. It's still going 30 years later. I was artistic director of it between 2013 and 2016, and then again for a couple of years after COVID. And it's had to adapt and change over the years, because it's nothing like it was at the beginning, because there was no YouTube at the time. There was very little international touring of comedians. You had, most people's experience of American comedians was if they'd been in America or they saw, it was a VHS tape of somebody. So it was extraordinary for these American comedians to come to Ireland, to come to Kilkenny and be exposed to a European English-speaking audience, and then for the audiences to have this. But obviously as cable TV and satellite TV came in and YouTube and so on, the need and the why for having a comedy festival in Kilkenny at all changed and evolved over time. So the festival had to evolve over time. So that's the Cat Laughs. That was 30 years ago. In more recent times, I set up a political cabaret, and the why of that was just that I looked around and saw that really there wasn't very much kind of intelligent discussion happening, especially on television, of politics and social affairs and so on. So I set up something which is basically modelled on a TV programme. Somebody may remember Nighthawks. And it was based on that, you know, you had a bar, you had this late night thing. It was set in a TV studio and everybody sits around and chats and has a few drinks. There's a bit of music, there's some comedy and so on. So I set this up about 20 years ago in Dublin. And then that became, that kind of separated out into a couple of different things. One of them was Minefield at Electric Picnic. So Electric Picnic, as you may know, was set up in 2004 by the late John Reynolds as a very different type of festival. Most people's experience of music festivals at that time was the horrors of oxygen and muddy fields and tents on fire and all that kind of thing. And John set Electric Picnic up as very much an antidote to that. So it was very, very small scale, first year, 5,000 people in Stradbally in County Laois. But he was very insistent that it was high quality food, high quality experience for the audience, and something that really kind of transported the people's experience of the outdoor music festival. And as part of that, he invited me to come in and do the Leviathan Political Cabaret, which we've been doing in a tent at the festival. So to kind of elevate the experience so that outside of the music, that there's something intellectual and somewhere to find sanctuary and reflect when the field turns to mud, as it often did. So I did that with my pal David McWilliams, who you might know from his podcast and columns and so on. But one of the first shows we did, Leviathan Political Cabaret, in the tent, there was literally somebody on the outside of the tent pissing in. So it was that famous adage about it's better to be inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. But we had both, as it happened. So that's the why of Minefield, and we now this is our 20th year doing Minefield. It's now a program of about 200 hours of programming across 6 stages: theatre, dance, spoken word, poetry, podcasts, political debate, historical inquiry, all of this kind of thing. And it's a joy to be part of, even 20 years on. And the why, I keep getting the why, because you know there's younger people, new generations turning up and wanting to go somewhere where they can express themselves, where they can talk about ideas, where they can experience culture. In the midst of, you know, what's otherwise a really big, you know, kind of very, very commercial festival. The next kind of bifurcation of Leviathan Political Cabaret is Kilconomics, which started in 2010 in the teeth of the financial crisis. What the Fuck Just Happened was actually the title of one of the shows. So the panels of experts of economists and journalists and analysts and financial people hosted unusually by comedians. So this was done with Richard Cook, who was one of the founders of the Cat Laughs Comedy Festival in Kilkenny. And the idea of using comedians was that, you know, you've got this the transferability of artistic modes and disciplines across formats, I think, is a really important thing, because you're broadening the audience, you're bringing people in, you're giving people permission to ask stupid questions, because the comedians are there to kind of make it accessible, make it understandable. The interesting thing about Kilconomics is that over, obviously, the financial crisis, well, that one anyway, went away. We're into the teeth of another one now. But over time, it kind of evolved, and the kind of the interests and the proclivities of the audience changed. You know, what people are inquiring about and what they want to know changed. So it kind of went from being that immediate "what the fuck just happened" to being a much more kind of inquiring and kind of discursive event, and it broadened out to geopolitics and historical issues and kind of a bit more fun, to be honest. And that's the why of Kilconomics and how it adapted and sustained over the last 15 years. This is something we're immensely proud of. So Maria and Tom and myself were commissioned by the Arts Council, worked with Sinead, and Carl on putting together this extraordinary season of arts experiences. So the why of this was we're in the middle of COVID and in the middle of lockdown. Venues were shut. We couldn't meet up in person. And the Arts Council made available a budget of €1 million. And then we created kind of from scratch an application system which we kept as kind of simple as possible and put it out to all types of artists, all disciplines, and said come back with ideas for how you can put something on in the middle of lockdown. And obviously, as other people have described about experiences of doing, the circumstances kept changing, the goalposts kept changing. So you didn't know from day to day what level, is it 15 people can gather, 5, none, whatever. So we put this together and just these extraordinary moments and brilliant working with all these artists and producers. So there's Light Ballet, which was a boat which travelled down the full length of the Shannon over 10 days and had this light ballet with music by David Kitt, and thousands and thousands of people were able to watch this literally from their doorstep or from their backyard as it went down the river. And again, it's just this adaptability of being able to show art in extraordinary circumstances. In the Magic Hour was a Cush Came show, which was shown in handball alleys around the country. And then they also had a live broadcast from their studio in Dublin, which was projected onto the wall. Really, really moving occasions. I think all of us had moments of tears at various of them. Arash Arish was a kind of a VR project where you sat with a VR headset. And again, because of COVID, we all had to be distanced. But you sat on the sea, you sat on the edge of the sea and felt the sea and the salt in your face. And then an extraordinary exhibition of Richard Moss's work in his home in Kilkenny outside the Butler Gallery. So the why of that was obviously the COVID and the lockdowns and so on, but the why expired. So then, that's then something that kind of sits in time. And I think one of the messages that I wanted to tell you is that, the why can expire. The reason that you're doing something can go away. And sometimes it's okay to let stuff go and say, it's had its time, it's had its moment, move on. And then the most recent project that we've been working on is with the design community in Kenmare and County Kerry. And it's something I'm really proud of. It's a very, very kind of different approach to work and to festival making than we've been involved in before. But the community in Kenmare came to me and said, we want to do a festival. And I said, like what? Like music? So I went down and met them and said, what are you good at? And as it happens, they have this incredible community of makers and designers in Kenmare and County Kerry, in this beautiful corner of the southwest of Ireland. And lots of them have come over generations from around Europe, from around the world, and have settled there. And there's just this brilliant ecosystem of makers and creators there. And I said, well, let's do a design festival, lean into what you're good at. So it's come from the ground up. And we did our first festival last year, which was just brought together lots of designers from lots of different disciplines from around Ireland and further afield. And people got on stage and had conversations. It wasn't discipline specific. So again, it's this kind of making things accessible and digestible and open to everybody and crossing over different artistic and design disciplines to get that real festival sense of people kind of exchanging ideas. And that is really, so that's my kind of chat really, is about the why of festivals and the importance of having an artistic and creative impetus and not being a marketing plan in search of programming.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so a huge thank you to our panel, I think, for their honesty, their insights, and their amazing festival stories. I particularly like the pissing out of the tent. So I think we've heard some great things that hopefully are going to spark some questions. We've looked at regenerating and respecting city space. We've talked about how festivals break reality, how they bring back to life nature, how they open up space for the arts, We need to look at, this idea of the festival coming first, a system within a system, and how fragile that model can be. And then I like Nusha's final questions about why does this need to exist, why are you doing it, and who is it for? So, lots to think about. Who would be brave and like to ask the first question? I presume we've got mics around. Any thoughts from the audience? Okay, good. We've got somebody down here, the third row. And maybe before you ask your question, would you like to say your name and what sort of festival organisation you're from?
Hello, my name's Caroline Conway. I'm from a light festival that has just lost its premises, but it was in a derelict barracks, so that's... But I particularly wanted to ask Hazel, I can't, the sheer amount of work in securing those venues, and you as a voluntary organisation over 15 years, I feel exhausted thinking about how you can possibly do that. Dealing with councils, how can you possibly sustain that?
It's a very good question. Thank you for asking. It's a really interesting one, I suppose, because I've been thinking about this in terms of could Hidden Door happen in other cities in the same way it does. Being volunteer-led and having to find the spaces and move around, and that being our MO. I think because Edinburgh is a festival city and our local authority is used to people going, I'd like to use this mad building for utter nonsense. That doesn't make it hugely easy, and I'm not going to lie, when we first started doing this, as I said, leaps of faith, naivety going into this, the local authority, the council, were sceptical. Very sceptical, and rightly so. We'd never a clue what we were doing. But after having worked with them for 10 years, it's a case of if we find a space and can say we're going to do this safely, we will work with you and the relevant teams, environmental health, etc. So that precedent has been set. We have that standing within Edinburgh. But I think because they already had this sort of knowledge of how spaces could be adapted from the August festivals, that helped. So maybe that was a barrier that we had to push against because we were a new kid on the block, I suppose, at that point. But there was that. But the finding of them, oh dear. It was a little easier 10 years ago than it is now, I'm not going to lie. We were just having this conversation before coming onto the panel, is that the spaces that are empty or stalled are being snapped up. They're part of local development plans. There are no parts of Edinburgh that don't potentially already have development proposals in or are earmarked for housing. There's a housing emergency in Scotland, a formally been announced by the Scottish Government like a couple of years ago. So we're working in an environment where every single part of the city that isn't currently being used is being eyed up for homes, which is completely legitimate. And so the spaces that we'd want to use are looking likely to be more out of the city, which again adapts our audience's expectations of how to find us and where, it's a case of not just walking to a Hidden Door venue from your home. You might actually have to think about getting a tram or a train, which is, if you go on holiday to a city, you expect to do that. But Edinburgh is quite used to everything just happening right there for us. So we're having to sort of explore that and see if our audiences will come with us. So it is a lot. We've got some very good relationships with, as I've mentioned, the council, the university, developers. My day job is in architectural conservation. That helps. So I work with architects and policymakers around use and reuse and meanwhile use. So it's a slog, but we also crowdsource some of this because one of the beautiful things is that people want to come and explore spaces. They might have some wonderful undiscovered gem at the end of their street, so we quite often go out to our community and say, hey guys, you love Hidden Door, where would you like us to go next? And it's amazing what comes up. So I think that's what we'll be doing this time, because we don't have a 2027 venue yet. So asking people where they'd like to see us is a really valid way of choosing the next site. But it is a big job, big spreadsheet, constantly being updated.
Mm-hmm. Gawain, have you got anything you'd like to add? Because obviously you're doing similar things.
Yeah, we actually went hunting for new spaces and found that was an interesting journey in and of itself, at how controlled and lack of access to space that there really is. The commercial property spaces, they don't want you to cost them money. They might gift you something, but then, if you're going to make money, might want some. So it's very binary in a commercial property space. There is a lot of unused commercial property spaces where they're now looking at, is there a quick 9-month lease? So everyone rolls on 9-month leases that you don't get any tenancy rights. So 9-month leases, and then there's no, again, you're back to precarity. And that's through all arts and cultural organisations in the city. For other civic-owned spaces, quite a lot of the city has, the City Council did a deal last year with a large construction company, which is a lovely 25-year contract, for them to do public-private deals on civic spaces, which are mostly car parks at the moment. And there is in that contract a requirement for meanwhile use. But because it's a public-private contract, then when you go to the City Council, they're going, the corporate needs to pay for it. And the corporate's going, well, sure, it's the public purse. They need to pay for it. And neither wants to step forward and argue for one or other because it's actually just a £1 billion project. Why would you worry about this in the meantime? It'll go away. So there's a bit of a, that's what the system is. And then there's a bit of a, fuck you, we're going to do it anyway. And you find actually when you do that, push a bit more, then conversation, you find a couple of good humans that are okay to come on the journey with you, but you have to put the graft in and build a relationship.
Okay, I think we've got another question here. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Tara Byrne and I run the Bealtaine Festival, so it's on at the moment. Very live issue, but we're not a place-based festival, so I'm kind of interested in the identity and the place-based aspect to mostly what the panel is today, because we're a nationwide festival, that's why we're not specific place. But there used to be a lot of discussion around the role of art projects like yours in contributing to regeneration on the positive side or gentrification on the negative side. And I'm just wondering that you know, maybe we've come through that and found a way to make peace with it, but what kind of reflection do the panel have on their role in that and doing someone else's job, the municipal job or the local authority's job, or contributing to profit making from the companies that come in and take back the spaces that you are usefully occupying for them. So I know it's an old discussion. I'm just wondering how you feel about it now.
Thank you. Good question. Anybody like to take that first? Anyone?
I feel like I'm possibly an obvious one to go first in that because we move around so much. We mentioned how we do work with spaces pre-development. I think the place-based aspect is about understanding what a place means to the people that live there. And where we are now is that we will continue to hopefully open up new spaces, but it's understanding what the people that they need from spaces around them and how they respond to them. So if we use a space, it's not that we've discovered it and then it becomes a development site. That's not how the planning system works. So we've had that narrative for a long time. We've had to counter that. And I think, again, we were talking about this, the optics of Hidden Door going into a space, using it, and then a couple of years later it's been developed. It's not great optics, but that's not actually the order of things. I mean, it might be the order of it chronologically, but we've not found the space and the developer hasn't gone, oh, that's a great site, I'll develop that. We're not clearing the space and then turning it into sort of a higher value area, potentially, in terms of it's already going to be what it is going to be. We'll just give it a bit of a swan song if it's going to be developed beyond use. And I think that the focus on the community having agency over their space at a point of transition is, I suppose, the most important part of Hidden Door's involvement there. And that legacy that then goes beyond the building to the community, of whatever community means at any given point, is probably where we are in our sort of discourse around how we use spaces.
Yeah, there's a couple of things as well. There's a gradient of people that are assholes and not. And so you'll find people that are good people that are in systems that you'd look at and being they're the bad guys, and actually just know how to make that work for you. So there are good people in it all, and they'll help in terms of sort of commercial property or in the civic property side of things, and they want something good for their city too, or their space. But we've been working quite heavily in actually the solution to precarity is place-based recognition. So if you go into a space, understand its culture, understand its heritage, talk to the community, work with the community, find a space to exactly your last thing in that design. There's an army of people that just need a wee bit of help. So go in and find what help you can add to it, and then be part of that community of change.
Yeah.
And then you're helping be the change makers. So I think that's the way to approach it from a place-based perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, in Kenmare, it's been an extraordinary experience. I mean, the level of voluntary effort that went in basically made it feasible, which otherwise wouldn't have been financially possible at all. Kerry County Council have been great help, and the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland in terms of core funding. But the main impetus and the main kind of financial sustainability of Design Kenmare comes from the people of Kenmare, and they're all designers and makers, and their friends and families, and they discover places and they discover ways around things and ways to make things happen when it's coming from grassroots up than if it's helicoptered in, you know.
We don't occupy spaces in that way, but we certainly occupy their walls. And in terms of trying to find those walls every year, to find an extra 30-odd walls to occupy, it couldn't be more complex and it couldn't be more different every time, and there's no set of rules for how it all works in terms of trying to juggle all the different stakeholders between the wall owners and the local authority. And we briefly touched on this in the conversation earlier. It just comes down to people and personnel, and you get a personnel change within the local authority, and suddenly your whole ecosystem has changed based on just one person's understanding of an arrangement. And I mean, from our point of view, you could easily have someone working on it full-time year-round and just about get that task completed. It's certainly complicated.
And it's worth underlining that, John, actually, just that discussion, you probably all in some form or another come across this conundrum, is that because of the way the civil service is set up in local authorities and in government departments and so on, you get people who work in a section which is, you know, events or is related to what you're doing in your festival, and they're there for 3 or 4 years and build up this load of knowledge, and then they get promoted, and they're not promoted within the section, they're promoted within the grade to a higher grade, so they go from executive officer to principal officer or whatever, and then all that accumulated knowledge is lost with them, you know, and that can be really frustrating, you know. I mean, it doesn't have, with more specialised agencies like the Arts Council and so on, people stay and have their career within the organisation, so it stays there. But in local authorities and the civil service, it can be a nightmare tracking, and then you've got a new bunch of people coming into the job who are great and well-meaning and enthusiastic, but they have none of the experience that people who've been there for years have.
And your favourite project suddenly becomes the worst thing you have to work on.
Yeah. And that's we're experiencing that at the moment, in that we've got some relatively new people in the public safety team who are literally inspecting the site probably today as I speak. Try not to think about it, but they've been trained up by the people that I started doing this with 10 years ago, who understand the journey that we've been on and come that journey with us. So whilst they might look at a site that we want to open up, which doesn't have a floor, it's got fire damage or there's dry rot, and put their head in the hands and go, Hazel, what are you bringing me this time?
Yeah.
But they've seen that with us. So we've managed to sort of go through this evolution, and the new teams coming in have been, I guess, mentored by people going, and they use Hidden Door as a case study. And we were told this the other day, and I was like, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
But when somebody new starts in that team, they give them Hidden Door. Not to try and shut us down, because obviously I's dotted, T's crossed, everything has to be done absolutely on point, because the spaces we use are not actually fit for the public to be in when we first get them, let alone, you know, public with a pint or two inside them. But I think that's an interesting legacy within the local authority as well, that we used as this sort of training ground for, you know, think outside the box. Everything is possible. You can do things, but they do have to be safe. And then, crack on with this mad project.
Seems like they've come up with the solution there as well, which is just a bit of succession planning and a bit of handover, instead of just you're gone from the job and there's someone new in and we never speak to each other.
I mean, it's been a bit difficult this year because the person that's new in is doing a fantastic job, but is maybe a little bit more... Cautious, thank you. That's the exact word I was after.
Diplomatically put.
But that's also, you know, I think it's my responsibility to enable them to feel comfortable and confident that we are taking our responsibility seriously. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, but I've quite enjoyed that as a, you know, as it being stated explicitly that yes, Hidden Door are a case study to train people up.
Wow.
Other questions? Any other questions from the floor?
Hi, thanks. Sean Molchanok, Festival and Film Officer for Kerry. I thanks so much for your inspirational and really kind of intriguing stories from each of you. And there's loads of things I could talk to or speak to around the challenges that you're facing around using spaces that are not naturally fit for purpose for human consumption, and how that can be a challenge in local authorities, in governments, in terms of safety, insurance, accessibility. So I understand that challenge, but one thing that kind of overarches all of that question is, I worked with Nisha last year on Design Kenmare, and one of the themes of one of the panels was about public space and who owns those public spaces. And it's a real perceptional challenge in that, you know, a local authority might develop a space and feel like it's for the public, but it's not really for the public, it's for their promotion. And a public space that you, Hazel, might be developing for the public to use can be perceived as just a temporary space, but is it for the public? So is that something that you've come across on how to get that perception of that these spaces are for the public and are for everybody, and who owns these civic spaces?
Is that a question for me, or do you want
to anybody, yeah, but yeah, it kind of picked up and to your point as well, you know, that all these civic spaces that you've developed, they are for the civic public, but often are not, even if they are transient and temporary. They're often not. They're either commercial or local authority. So how do you get that, or has perception for the public been a challenge for you, and how do you get over that perception?
I would split it in two. Actually, we've been, funny you were saying about being used as a case study. We've now had, as a result of it ending and having tried to go again, and we were trying to find sites, so we were lobbying council, we were going to councillors that were sympathetic to what we'd been doing and liked what we'd done, and getting them to come back round at the chief exec of the council, and whisper campaigns and all sorts of things to try and get, would you please come on? And I got a wee bit, I almost lost my temper after hearing this same phrase about 20 times by this point, where the different people would go, that was an amazing thing, or that was incredible for the city, or something that was a really positive statement, and then they go, but. And I nearly lost my rag the last time, and I just went, do you know what it is? Just stop. It's all right. Just stop it. That was a really amazing thing. The end. I know you're not going to give me money, I know you're not going to help me, just stop there and go away and walk away and enjoy the moment that you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Done. And I found that was quite an empowering thing to do, so I started using that. But what has happened actually is the ripple effects of the impact of it have now had where I'm starting to get phone calls from councillors, or conversations have happened in council. We were invited in to speak to the Our Planet Committee of the council, and you get 15 minutes with a 5-minute Q&A. We got 45 minutes of Q&A from all the people around the table wanting to know what could council do. And so it has had the effect that we wanted to do. It was proactivism from our perspective. So it has started to do that. From a public perspective, it's a little more difficult to quantify to know whether that has had an impact or an effect. But the friendships and the relationships that we built up in all manners of parts of our society, and to your point on the Venn diagram and overlap of people, because that happened, then it has had this ripple effect of people coming back and questioning and go, what about that building? What about that bit of empty ground? How do we use that? So I know that it has had the effect and it has had the change. It hasn't percolated into allowing us the opportunity to do stuff or others to do stuff, but I think it will.
Brilliant.
I hope it will. That was for me.
And rightly so, rightly so. Burst into spontaneous applause. No, I think that the ripple is a really good way of putting it. I actually sometimes forget to sort of stop and step back and actually look at what has changed and what has been achieved, because when you're just going, you start planning one thing after you've finished planning the next. But one of the earliest things I think that made a material difference to how spaces are used and who they're for was one of our earliest sites, it was the one I showed with the office block in the background, that was a council-owned property, and we actually used it 2 years in a row, because the first year we used it, they were like, oh, actually this is really good, you can come back again, and then, oh, we sold it, oh no. But they then, working with Edinburgh World Heritage, who have the World Heritage Site Management Plan, that's part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. They worked with the council to use Hidden Door as a case study, and that case study then became enshrined in internal policy to promote the active use of meanwhile use spaces from their own portfolio, their own estate. We now actually benefit from that in that we have an office building that they've given us on a 10-year meanwhile use for essentially a peppercorn rent. It'll go up and up, but we'll then sort of make good, and it'll be a hub we've had it for about a year. We're still work in progress, but other organisations benefit from council-owned portfolio properties that they are then using for cultural or other charitable use. So we did help with that because our relationship with them was one of sort of transparency and honesty, and this has benefited us in this way. And being able to have those conversations did then actually materially change something, which I'm really proud of. The other thing is, you know, we're not being asked by anybody to do this, I think is the thing. We're doing this with everybody, I think is the point. So nobody, the council haven't said, oh, we think it would be good if you did this, or the building owner doesn't really care what we do. We've asked if we can use this space. So when I say everybody builds it, that really is true. The community, the geographical community around the spaces we use are invited not only just to attend for free, of course, but also to come in, meet us, get involved. We did a community litter pick last week around the space. People do come and they physically paint a wall or help an artist install, and then they come in and they say, I made that, I did that. And I know I've sort of laboured that point already. But that's where the space then ceases to belong to somebody else, and it becomes truly of everybody that has pitched in and mucked in. I actually sometimes find it quite remarkable how confident volunteers who have just come to one shift to set up and help sweep a floor, they'll saunter in the next day and they look like they own the place, and that is perfect. That's what you want, because it's true. They do, well, not literally, but they do. And that's the ethos. And whilst we're talking about sustainability on a grander scheme, how do you sort of keep that truly inclusive approach to anybody being able to muck in with something when you then also have to evolve and grow as an organisation with additional responsibilities, additional reporting obligations if you are lucky enough to be funded, etc., whilst keeping that sort of put on high vis vest, come get stuck in, and it does genuinely belong to you. And I think that's why talking about it being a volunteer organisation helps as well, because we're not a big, we might look shiny to some people, but we're not sort of a big corporate. If I'm a volunteer, then I can genuinely say, come on in, welcome, because this is yours as well. And that, I think, is why it works in the spaces we use in a slightly different way than if we were, again, that word helicoptered in to do something. But we need to be careful that doesn't change, because that is the ultimate ethos of what, you know, making change together is really important.
I think we've got time for one more question. Is there any other questions from the audience? If not, I've got a question. I wanted to ask Nusha something that you said, which was just to explore a bit further, which you said it's okay to let things go. And I think that's a huge learning and something we're probably not very good at with festivals. Like, you know, we've got so much invested and it's really, really hard to let go of things. So I just wanted you to explore that a bit further.
As my chair, I'm just checking you're not giving me like some hints, right? No, okay, good.
So there are kind of two sides to that. I mean, one is that, you know, if you've got a really strong organisation that has got a very strong why, and you've got somebody who's been, you know, the artistic driving force or the kinetic driving force behind something, and they're about to retire or they pass away or whatever, you know, it's good to have some kind of succession planning, provided the why remains once that person is gone, has moved on. And then the other side of that is you know, as I was describing about the Cat Laughs Comedy Festival, you know, it evolved through different eras. Arguably, there were a couple of moments at which it probably could have and should have kind of hung up its boots, but didn't and kept going. And then, you know, then that becomes a story in itself. But I think it is okay if the why is gone. It is okay to let go and to move on. And I think that's good and healthy, you know, because it stops the thing that you're doing, the festival that you're doing, kind of lose its luster and lose its kind of founding enthusiasm and founding magic, you know, and become a kind of a pale imitation of what it started out on. You know, leave when you're ahead. Don't jump the shark.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's probably a good note to end on. So I'd like to give huge thank you to Nisha, to John, to Hazel, to Guan for just their amazing insights and honesty And yeah, really some brilliant food for thought there going into the end of the conference. So huge
thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Just some very quick final notes. I won't keep you too long because I know people want to get away. But just to thank the panel, just to thank Jane and Hazel and Nisha, Gawain and John, and just to thank you for your insights and your intelligence and your experience as well, because it was really fascinating talking to you before the session as well as hearing you today. So thank you so much. And just thank you to our virtual delegates who were tuning in this particular venue. So thank you. Just on behalf of the Arts Council, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all of our contributors today, and thank you for your shared intelligence and actually having all those conversations in between the sessions to make the conference so successful, and for your contributions as well. In bringing this conference to a close, day 2, day 3 is tomorrow. As we draw towards the end, I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody in the room for sharing their intelligence. The way the Arts Council actually learns how to program these conferences, but also how to develop our policy, is by listening to the sector. So we'd just like to thank you for that and your contributions. And we've hoped that you found those interactions helpful. And we encourage you to keep in touch with each other and to recognise your sectoral voice, which is really important as festival makers. There will be another Festival Makers Conference. I'm committing the Arts Council, which maybe I shouldn't do, and Festival Makers Connect in 2028. And we hope that you will come back and share your developments and insights, especially given the conversations that we've had this week in particular have been in an all-Ireland context. We have more to share, and as witnessed over these 2 days, we have more in common than we have that divides us. So thank you for being so generous in that sharing. Thank you to our partners, especially to the Model today, Blue Raincoat and the Factory Space yesterday and today, and the Hawkswell. We've been supported brilliantly, and we'd like to thank you for all of your support and hard work as partners. If you are, just some housekeeping, if you're attending the British Council session, it starts at 2 in the atrium, which is the beginning of our day 3 section of the programme. And the Arts Council's festivals team, if you have booked a ticket for the conference, we will circulate an evaluation. So we would really appreciate if you could fill that in. Check your spam. It only takes a couple of, take about 5-10 minutes to fill out, but we really appreciate your feedback. Helps us to build our conference program for the next time. And finally, we're going to ask you to do one thing, if it's okay. We're going to head out collectively onto the lawn and take a photograph together, which is a kind of a visual memory of us being able to share together. So we would love to do that as a final goodbye. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. All right.